Welcome to another story on Cheating Tales Lab. We're so happy to have you here, and today's story is one we think you'll really enjoy. So without further ado, let's begin. Zephyr Blackwood's keys jangled as he fumbled with the lock. A bouquet of blue orchids cradled in one arm and a small velvet box tucked securely in his pocket. The house was unnaturally quiet as he stepped inside, the silence pressing against his ears like a physical force. "Lyra," he called out, his voice echoing through the empty rooms. No answer. Something was off. Zephyr's eyes darted around, taking in the subtle signs of disturbance. A photo frame lay face down on the side table, its usual place marred by its absence. As he moved further into the house, the wrongness intensified. In the kitchen, Lyra's favorite mug lay shattered on the floor, its pieces scattered like fallen stars. Her purse sat abandoned on the counter, its contents undisturbed. The orchids suddenly felt heavy in his hands, their delicate petals a mockery of the celebration he'd anticipated. Zephyr's heart raced as he made his way to the living room. Lyra's phone rested on the coffee table, its screen a web of cracks. He picked it up gingerly, as if it might bite him. The cracks spread outward from the center, like the tendrils of a sinister conspiracy reaching into his life. With trembling fingers, he pulled out his own phone and dialed Iris Zhao's number. Lyra's best friend picked up on the third ring, her voice pitched oddly high. "Hello? Zephyr? Iris, have you seen Lyra? She's not home, and things look strange." There was a pause, too long to be natural. "And no, I haven't seen her. Is everything okay?" Zephyr's suspicion grew with each stuttered word. Iris was hiding something, her usual poise crumbling under the weight of whatever secret she was keeping. "Are you sure? You haven't heard from her at all?" "I'm sorry, Zephyr. I really don't know where she is." The words tumbled out too quickly, each one another brick in the wall of deception. After hanging up, Zephyr found himself in their bedroom, drawn there by some instinct he couldn't name. His eyes fell on Lyra's jewelry box, an ornate wooden thing they bought on their honeymoon. Something niggled at the back of his mind. He opened it, fingers tracing the familiar contours. Then he paused. Was that a seam where there shouldn't be one? Pressing gently, he felt a click, and a false bottom sprang open. Inside lay a burner phone, its cheap plastic a stark contrast to Lyra's elegant jewelry. Zephyr's hand shook as he turned it on. The messages that filled the screen were in a code he didn't recognize, a fact that chilled him to the bone. He was a top cryptographer, for God's sake. If he couldn't crack it at a glance. The shrill ring of his phone cut through his thoughts like a knife. Detective Nolan Frost's gruff voice filled his ear before he could even say hello. "Mr. Blackwood, we found your wife barely alive in a motel. You need to come now." The words hit Zephyr like a physical blow. He stumbled, catching himself on the edge of the dresser. "What happened? Is she—" "Just get here," Frost interrupted, his tone grim. "There's more to this than meets the eye." As Zephyr rushed out the door, the velvet box fell from his pocket forgotten. The sapphire necklace inside glinted in the fading light, a testament to the love he thought he knew. The Starlight Motel loomed before Zephyr, its neon sign flickering weakly in the twilight. The air was thick with the acrid stench of burnt rubber and gasoline, a pungent cocktail that made his stomach churn. Police cars formed a barrier around the scene, their lights painting the world in alternating flashes of red and blue. An ambulance stood nearby, its back doors open like the maw of some patient beast. And there, wrapped around a lamppost like some grotesque modern art installation, was a mangled red Porsche. Detective Frost materialized out of the chaos, his weathered face a mask of grim determination. "Mr. Blackwood," he said, nodding in greeting. "Your wife was in an accident with Caspian Vex, her ex from college. He was driving under the influence." Zephyr's mind reeled. Caspian Vex? Lyra had never mentioned him. Frost's next words hit even harder. "But there's more to this than meets the eye, Mr. Blackwood." Before Zephyr could press for details, movement caught his eye. Paramedics were wheeling out a stretcher, and on it lay Lyra. Her face was pale, marred by ugly bruises that stood out like accusatory fingers pointing at some unseen culprit. Their eyes met across the chaos of the crime scene. Lyra reached out weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Honey, I'm so sorry. It was an accident." The words seemed to carry a weight beyond their simple meaning, laden with secrets and lies. Zephyr turned away, unable to bear the sight of her. His gaze fell on a briefcase among the scattered debris, its contents spilling out onto the asphalt. He caught glimpses of what looked like classified documents before a uniformed officer hurried to gather them up. As he made his way back to his car, a hushed conversation between two paramedics reached his ears. "Did you see those badges? High-level clearance, man." "Yeah, and those encrypted hard drives? What the hell were they doing here?" Zephyr's mind whirled, pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to take shape. What had Lyra gotten herself into? And more importantly, what had she dragged him into along with her? The sterile corridors of the National Cyber Defense Agency headquarters seemed colder than usual as Zephyr made his way to his office. The events of the past few hours had left him feeling like a stranger in his own life. With practiced ease, he bypassed the standard security protocols and accessed the agency's personnel files. His fingers flew over the keyboard, searching for a name he'd never thought he'd need to know. Caspian Vex. There it was. Hired 3 months ago as a cybersecurity consultant. Zephyr's eyes narrowed. It was a vague title, the kind used when someone needed access but didn't want to draw attention. Red flags unfurled in his mind, each one a warning he'd failed to heed. Burning the midnight oil? Zephyr nearly jumped out of his skin. Raven Coe stood in the doorway, her sharp eyes taking in his disheveled appearance and the classified files on his screen. "Raven, He hesitated, weighing his options. Then, making a decision, he gestured for her to come in. "I need your help, but this stays between us." In a secure room, away from prying eyes and ears, Zephyr laid out the situation. Raven listened, her brilliant mind already connecting dots he hadn't even seen. "We need to look at the access logs," she said, her fingers dancing across a keyboard. "If what you're saying is true, there should be a pattern." Hours passed in a blur of code and caffeine. As the first rays of dawn crept through the windows, they had their answer. A series of minor but strategic security breaches over the past 6 months, all traced back to Zephyr's credentials. But the timestamps. "I wasn't even in the building for some of these," Zephyr muttered. Raven's voice was grim. "Someone's been using your access, and doing a damn good job of covering their tracks." They dug deeper, following digital breadcrumbs through the labyrinth of the agency's systems. And then they found it. Fragmented connections between Caspian Vex and chatter about a group known as the Cypher Syndicate on the dark web. "I've heard whispers about them," Raven said, her face illuminated by the glow of the screen. "They're planning something big, a cyber attack that could cripple entire nations." The implications hit Zephyr like a physical blow. Lyra had been using their marriage as a cover, feeding classified information to the Cypher Syndicate through Caspian. But why? What could possibly drive her to betray not just him, but their entire nation? With trembling hands, he pulled out the burner phone he'd found in Lyra's jewelry box. The encrypted messages that had baffled him earlier now seemed to mock him with their secrets. "Can you break this?" he asked Raven, handing her the phone. Her eyes lit up with the challenge. "Give me an hour." 53 minutes later, Raven's triumphant cry broke the tense silence. "I'm in." Zephyr leaned over her shoulder, his heart pounding. As the decrypted messages filled the screen, he felt the last remnants of his world crumble around him. Lyra wasn't just having an affair or stealing information. She was a deep-cover operative for the Cypher Syndicate, planted years ago to infiltrate the agency through him. Their entire relationship, their marriage, their life together, it had all been a lie. As the weight of the betrayal crashed over him, Zephyr gripped the edge of the desk, his knuckles turning white. He'd thought he was living a love story. Instead, he'd been an unwitting pawn in a game of international espionage. And now, it was time to change the rules. The antiseptic smell of the hospital corridor assaulted Zephyr's nostrils as he made his way to Lyra's room. A manila envelope containing divorce papers was tucked under his arm, its weight a constant reminder of the betrayal that had shattered his world. Room 307. Zephyr paused at the door, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He pushed it open, the hinges squeaking softly as if protesting the intrusion. The sterile whiteness of the hospital room was a stark contrast to the warmth their home once held. Lyra lay in the bed, looking small and vulnerable in her hospital gown. Her eyes widened as she saw him, a mix of emotions flashing across her face: relief, fear, and something else Zephyr couldn't quite place. "Zephyr," she began, her voice cracking. "I can explain." He cut her off with a raised hand, his face an impassive mask. Without a word, he placed a manila envelope on her bedside table. The soft thud it made seemed to echo in the silence of the room. Lyra's eyes darted to the envelope, then back to Zephyr. Understanding dawned on her face, followed quickly by panic. "Please, just let me." The door opened again, cutting off her plea. Caspian Vex sauntered in, his arm in a sling and a nasty gash running across his forehead. The smug grin on his face faltered slightly as he registered Zephyr's presence. "Well, well," Caspian drawled, recovering quickly. "If it isn't the man of the hour." Zephyr's jaw clenched, his hands balling into fists at his sides. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. Caspian's next words hit like a sledgehammer. "I suppose introductions are in order. Zephyr Blackwood. Meet Lyra's handler in the Cipher Syndicate." "Oh, wait, that's me." Lyra's sharp intake of breath was the only sound in the room. Zephyr's mind raced, processing this new information. He'd suspected, of course, but hearing it confirmed so brazenly. "What do you want?" Zephyr managed to grit out, his voice low and dangerous. Caspian's smirk widened. "Straight to business. I like that." He lowered himself into a chair, wincing slightly as the movement jostled his injured arm. "We want your cooperation, Zephyr. Your expertise, your access. In return, we don't expose certain indiscretions from your past." Zephyr's blood ran cold. How could they possibly know about... "That's right," Caspian continued, clearly enjoying himself. "Lyra here discovered a rather interesting ethical breach from your early days at the agency. Wouldn't want that getting out, would we?" Zephyr's face remained impassive, but his mind was working overtime. He needed time, needed to think. I need some time to consider this," he said, allowing a hint of vulnerability to creep into his voice. Caspian nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Take all the time you need. We'll be in touch." As Zephyr turned to leave, his hand brushed against the get-well card in his pocket. In one smooth motion, he placed it on Lyra's bedside table, right next to the divorce papers. The high-tech listening device hidden within would pick up every word spoken in this room. With a final, inscrutable look at Lyra, Zephyr walked out, the first step of his counter-strategy set in motion. The game was on, and he intended to win. Artemis Steele's office was a fortress within a fortress. Zephyr had been here countless times before, but never like this. Never with the weight of betrayal and conspiracy hanging over his head. Director Steele herself was a formidable presence, her sharp eyes seeming to pierce right through him as he laid out everything he'd uncovered. The burner phone, the security breaches, the Cipher Syndicate, Lyra's true identity. He held nothing back. As he finished his report, Steele leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled under her chin. The silence stretched on, broken only by the soft ticking of an antique clock on the wall. Finally, she spoke. "This goes deeper than we ever imagined." Her eyes narrowed as she absorbed the information. "We need to turn this to our advantage." Zephyr nodded, relieved that she believed him. "What do you suggest, Director?" A slow, predatory smile spread across Steele's face. "We make you a double agent, Mr. Blackwood. Feed false information to Lyra and Caspian. Use them to unravel the entire Cipher Syndicate operation from the inside out." The plan was daring, dangerous, and exactly what Zephyr had hoped for. "I'm in," he said without hesitation. Over the next few weeks, Zephyr lived a precarious double life. To Lyra and Caspian, he appeared to be a reluctant accomplice, sharing carefully selected tidbits of classified information. Each piece of data was meticulously crafted misinformation, designed to mislead the Cypher Syndicate while appearing valuable on the surface. Lyra, now out of the hospital, watched him with a mix of suspicion and hope. Zephyr played his part to perfection, allowing just enough reluctance and resentment to show through to make his cooperation believable. Caspian, for his part, seemed to revel in his perceived victory. His smug grins and condescending pats on the back made Zephyr's skin crawl, but he endured it all for the sake of the mission. One night, as Zephyr sat in his darkened living room, monitoring the feed from the listening device he'd planted in Lyra's hospital room, he overheard a conversation that chilled him to the bone. "Everything's going according to plan." Lyra's voice came through, tinny but clear. "Zephyr's cooperating, just like you said he would." "Good," a gruff male voice replied. Zephyr's breath caught in his throat as he recognized it. Detective Nolan Frost. "Keep him in line. We can't afford any slip-ups this close to the endgame." Zephyr's mind reeled. Detective Frost, the man in charge of investigating the motel incident, was on the Cypher Syndicate's payroll. The conspiracy ran deeper than he had ever imagined. As the days wore on, the toll of his deception began to show. Dark circles appeared under his eyes. His movements became jittery and unpredictable. Raven, ever observant, couldn't help but notice. "Zephyr," she said one day, cornering him in a secure room at the NCDA. "What's going on with you? And don't tell me it's nothing. I know you better than that." For a moment, Zephyr considered brushing her off, but the concern in her eyes, the genuine worry in her voice, broke through his defenses. In a moment of vulnerability, he found himself confiding in her about the emotional turmoil he was experiencing. "I feel like I'm losing myself," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every lie, every piece of false information I feed them, it's like I'm chipping away at who I am." Raven listened silently, her presence a comforting anchor in the storm of his emotions. When he finished, she placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him. "You're not losing yourself," she said firmly. "You're fighting for what's right, even when it's hard. That's who you are, Zephyr. Don't ever forget that." Her words, simple yet powerful, gave Zephyr the strength to continue. As he navigated this treacherous path, Raven's support became his lifeline, a reminder of why he was fighting in the first place. The abandoned subway station loomed before Zephyr, its entrance a gaping maw in the side of a decrepit building. Graffiti covered every available surface, and the air was thick with the musty smell of decay and neglect. Zephyr adjusted his glasses, ensuring the hidden camera was in place. The live stream to the secure NCDA server was already running, capturing every detail of this clandestine meeting with the Cypher Syndicate leaders. As he descended into the bowels of the station, the dank atmosphere closed in around him. Flickering lights cast eerie shadows on the walls, and the sound of dripping water echoed ominously in the distance. The syndicate members were already gathered, their faces partially obscured by the poor lighting. Zephyr recognized Caspian and Lyra among them, along with a few others he'd seen in surveillance photos. As the meeting progressed, Zephyr's blood ran cold. The Syndicate's ultimate plan was far more ambitious and devastating than anyone had anticipated. They intended to crash the global financial market using stolen algorithms, creating worldwide economic chaos on an unprecedented scale. Zephyr kept his face impassive as he absorbed this information, but inside, his mind was racing. The implications were staggering. Millions of lives would be affected, entire nations brought to their knees. He knew then that the stakes of his mission had just been raised exponentially. In the days that followed, Lyra made several attempts to rekindle their relationship. Her touches, once a source of comfort and joy, now felt like poison on Zephyr's skin. Her words of love and regret rang hollow in his ears. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered one night, her hand on his arm. You have to believe me, Zephyr. Everything I've done, it was for a greater cause. Zephyr played along, forcing himself to respond with just the right mix of hesitation and lingering affection. All the while, he documented every interaction, building a case that would eventually bring the entire syndicate crashing down. Caspian, meanwhile, grew increasingly paranoid. Zephyr often caught him watching with narrowed eyes, as if trying to peer into his very thoughts. I want round-the-clock surveillance on Blackwood, Caspian barked at one of his underlings. If he so much as sneezes, I want to know about it. This new level of scrutiny complicated Zephyr's covert activities. Communication with Director Steele and Raven became a dangerous game of cat and mouse. He found himself employing ever more creative methods to pass along crucial information without detection. Late one night, as Zephyr was in the middle of transmitting a particularly sensitive piece of intel to Director Steele, disaster nearly struck. The door to his office began to open, the handle turning agonizingly slowly. Zephyr's heart pounded in his chest as he scrambled to hide the evidence of his true allegiance. Just as the door swung open, revealing one of Caspian's men, Raven's voice came through on the intercom. Zephyr, I need you in the lab right away. We've got a situation with the firewall. The syndicate member hesitated, then grudgingly allowed Zephyr to leave. As he hurried down the corridor, Zephyr sent a silent thank you to Raven for her perfectly timed intervention. Later, as he pored over some of the syndicate's encrypted communications, Zephyr made a chilling discovery. Hidden within the complex codes and ciphers was evidence suggesting that the Cipher Syndicate had infiltrated the highest levels of government. But it was the next revelation that truly shook him to his core. As he dug deeper, following a trail of digital breadcrumbs, he uncovered something that made his blood run cold. The evidence pointed to a mole within the upper echelons of the NCDA itself. Zephyr sat back in his chair, his mind reeling from the implications. The enemy wasn't just out there. It was here, within the very walls he'd sworn to protect. As he stared at the damning evidence on his screen, one thought echoed through his mind. Who could he trust now? The air in the NCDA's secure conference room crackled with tension. Zephyr Blackwood stood at the head of the table, his eyes hard as flint as he surveyed the small group of trusted operatives before him. Director Artemis Steele sat to his right, her face an impassive mask that betrayed nothing of the high-stakes game they were about to play. Ladies and gentlemen, Zephyr began, his voice low and steady, what I'm about to propose is not only dangerous but technically illegal. If anyone wants to leave now, there will be no repercussions. No one moved. Zephyr nodded, a grim smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Good. Let's begin. Over the next hour, Zephyr laid out the bones of an elaborate sting operation. The centerpiece? A fictitious quantum encryption server that would supposedly house the world's most sensitive financial data. We're going to create a honeypot so sweet the Cipher Syndicate won't be able to resist, Zephyr explained, his fingers dancing across a holographic display as he spoke. This server will be our bait, our trap, and our key to bringing down the entire operation. Director Steele leaned forward, her sharp eyes narrowing as she absorbed the details. And how do you propose we leak this information without arousing suspicion? Zephyr's smile was cold. Through me. I'll feed the information to Lyra and Caspian, bit by tantalizing bit. They think they have me under their thumb. It's time we use that to our advantage. As the meeting progressed, the plan took shape. Carefully controlled leaks, strategically placed vulnerabilities, all designed to draw the Cipher Syndicate into a trap of the NCDA's making. Over the next few weeks, Zephyr became a master of misdirection. Every conversation with Lyra, every clandestine meeting with Caspian, became an opportunity to drop hints about the quantum encryption server. I overheard something interesting today, Zephyr would say, his voice carefully modulated to sound both nervous and excited. A new server, supposed to be unhackable. It's got everyone at the agency on edge. He watched as the bait was taken, hook, line, and sinker. The Cipher Syndicate mobilized their most skilled hackers, pouring resources into cracking what they believed to be the ultimate prize. Zephyr stood in the shadows of the NCDA's main server room, watching as technicians scurried about, setting up the elaborate ruse. Fake servers hummed, their blinking lights a testament to the agency's attention to detail. Everything had to be perfect. The slightest inconsistency could blow the entire operation. As he observed the controlled chaos, a familiar voice cut through the noise. Zephyr. He turned to see Lyra approaching, Caspian close behind. Their faces were masks of determination and barely concealed greed. "We need access to the server room," Lyra said, her voice low and urgent. "The quantum encryption server. You're going to get us in." Zephyr felt a chill run down his spine. This was it, the endgame. He nodded slowly, playing the part of the reluctant accomplice to perfection. "All right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But after this, we're done. I want out." Caspian's laugh was cold and mirthless. "Oh, Zephyr, you're in this for the long haul now. There's no getting out." As Zephyr led them towards the heart of the trap, he couldn't shake a nagging feeling of unease. Something was off. The Syndicate's movement seemed too precise, too well-informed. It was as if they knew exactly where to step to avoid the NCDA's carefully laid snares. A chilling realization struck him like a physical blow. There was a mole on his team. Someone privy to the details of the sting operation was feeding information to the Syndicate. As he punched in the access code to the server room, Zephyr's mind raced. The trap was sprung, but who was really caught in its jaws? He had mere moments to identify the traitor and salvage the operation before everything fell apart. The heavy door swung open with a soft hiss, revealing the blinking lights and humming servers within. As Lyra and Caspian stepped eagerly into the room, Zephyr's hand hovered over the concealed panic button in his pocket. One press, and the entire building would go into lockdown. But before he could act, a voice from behind froze him in his tracks. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Blackwood." Zephyr turned slowly, his blood running cold as he recognized the speaker. The pieces of the puzzle suddenly clicked into place, revealing a picture far more twisted than he could have imagined. The server room, once a sanctuary of order and control, had become a battleground. Zephyr's mind raced, processing the unfolding chaos with the cold precision of the master cryptographer he was. The Syndicate's uncanny knowledge of their countermeasures suddenly made horrifying sense. Zephyr's eyes darted around the room, cataloging every face, every micro-expression. The mole was here, in this very room. But who? A bead of sweat trickled down his spine as he realized the magnitude of the situation. The entire operation was unraveling faster than he could patch the holes. He was going to have to improvise, relying on years of experience and the razor-sharp instincts honed through countless cyber battles. "Impressive setup, Zephyr." Caspian's voice dripped with smug satisfaction. "Almost had us fooled. Almost." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes cold and calculating. Gone was the vulnerability she'd shown in the hospital. This was the real Lyra, the deep-cover operative who had played him for years. "Did you really think we wouldn't see through your little charade?" she asked, her voice like silk over steel. Zephyr's retort died on his lips as a new figure entered the fray. Detective Nolan Frost sauntered into the server room, a predatory grin on his weathered face. "Surprised to see me, Blackwood?" Frost chuckled. "You should have dug a little deeper into that motel incident. Might have saved you some trouble." The trio converged on Zephyr, backing him against the humming servers. They thought they had won, their victory assured by treachery and deceit. But Zephyr Blackwood was far from beaten. "You're right," he said, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "I should have dug deeper. Into all of you." With a swift motion, Zephyr pulled out a small device from his pocket. The Syndicate members tensed, expecting a weapon. Instead, a holographic display flickered to life, filling the air with streams of data. "What you're seeing," Zephyr explained, his confidence growing with each word, "is every piece of intelligence I've gathered on the Cypher Syndicate over the past weeks. Every conversation, every transaction, every dirty little secret. Caspian's face drained of color. Lyra's eyes widened in disbelief. Frost's hand inched towards his concealed weapon. The real sting operation, Zephyr continued, was layers deep. This server room, it's a sophisticated containment system. The moment you stepped inside, you activated a dormant protocol. We're locked in, and every word you say is being recorded and transmitted to law enforcement agencies worldwide. The realization of their predicament dawned on the syndicate members' faces. They had walked right into a trap far more intricate than they could have imagined. Lyra, ever the quick thinker, made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Her face softened, tears welling up in her eyes. "Zephyr, please," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "What we had, it wasn't all a lie. I grew to love you. Truly. We can still have a life together. Just give me a chance to explain." For a moment, just a fleeting instant, Zephyr's resolve wavered. The memory of happier times, of a love he thought was real, threatened to overwhelm him. But then he remembered the betrayal, the years of lies, the lives put at risk for the syndicate's twisted ambitions. His expression hardened. "No, Lyra," he said, his voice cold. "We can't." With a subtle hand motion, Zephyr activated the final phase of his countermove. Alarms blared throughout the building as armed NCDA agents began to swarm towards their location. Panic erupted in the server room. Caspian lunged for the door, only to find it sealed shut. Frost drew his weapon, his eyes darting wildly for an escape route. Lyra stood frozen, the full weight of her actions finally crashing down upon her. In the chaos, the three managed to slip past Zephyr, making a break for the emergency stairwell. They disappeared through the door, just as the first NCDA agents rounded the corner. Zephyr gave chase, his intimate knowledge of the building's layout guiding his pursuit. The hunt was on, and he was determined to see it through to the bitter end. Rain lashed against the windows of the NCDA headquarters as Zephyr tore through the labyrinthine corridors. His footsteps echoed off the sterile walls, mingling with the distant shouts of agents and the wail of alarms. He could hear them ahead, Lyra, Caspian, and Frost, their desperation palpable in the frantic pounding of their feet. But Zephyr had the home field advantage. He'd walked these halls countless times, knew every shortcut and hidden passage. As they approached a T-junction, Zephyr cut left, taking a maintenance corridor that would bring him out ahead of the fleeing trio. He burst through a door just as they rounded the corner, nearly colliding with Caspian. The look of shock on their faces was almost comical. Almost. "End of the line," Zephyr panted, blocking their path. Frost raised his weapon, but Lyra pushed his arm down. "No, there's still a way out." The roof. They turned and ran, leaving Zephyr to give chase once more. Up they went, flight after flight of stairs, the storm growing louder with each floor they climbed. Finally, they burst onto the roof. The rain came down in sheets, drenching them instantly. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the scene in stark, electric blue. Lyra spun to face Zephyr, her hair plastered to her face, her eyes wild. "Zephyr, please," she shouted over the howling wind. "You have to listen to me. I'm pregnant. It's yours." The words hit Zephyr like a physical blow. He faltered, his mind reeling. Could it be true? After everything, could there be an innocent life caught in the crossfire of their deception? Caspian seized a moment of distraction. "Enough of this shit," he snarled, pulling out a small remote. With the press of a button, the whir of rotors cut through the storm. A helicopter rose into view, hovering at the edge of the roof. Their escape route. "It's over, Zephyr," Frost called out, already moving towards a chopper. "You lost. Accept it." But Zephyr wasn't done. Not by a long shot. As Lyra and Caspian made for the helicopter, Zephyr reached into his pocket and activated a device of his own. To anyone watching, it would have looked like he was simply letting them go. They didn't know that every word spoken in that helicopter would be broadcast to law enforcement agencies worldwide. Their escape vehicle had become a flying confession booth. Zephyr stood in the rain, watching as the helicopter lifted off into the stormy night. Water streamed down his face, indistinguishable from the tears he refused to acknowledge. A hand on his shoulder startled him. He turned to see Director Steele, her usually immaculate suit soaked through, her eyes glinting with a fierce pride. "It's done," Zephyr said, his voice barely audible over the fading sound of rotors. "They thought they could use me, betray me, and walk away. But they underestimated what I'm capable of. This is the price of their deceit." Steele nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "Come on," she said gently. "Let's get you inside. There's still work to be done." As they turned to leave the roof, Zephyr cast one last look at the storm-tossed sky. The helicopter was gone, swallowed by the night. But he knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where the echoes of betrayal would resound through the digital realm, changing the landscape of cybersecurity forever. With a deep breath, Zephyr squared his shoulders and followed Steele back into the building. The storm raged on, but within him, a calm had settled. He had faced his betrayers, confronted his past, and emerged stronger. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them. The war against the Cypher Syndicate was far from over, but tonight, Zephyr Blackwood had struck a decisive blow, and he would not rest until the last echoes of their betrayal had been silenced. The federal courthouse loomed before Zephyr Blackwood, its imposing facade a stark reminder of the gravity of the proceedings about to unfold within. 2 months had passed since that rain-soaked confrontation on the NCDA rooftop, but the weight of those events still pressed heavily upon his shoulders. As he ascended the steps, cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. Zephyr kept his gaze forward, his face an impassive mask. He was the star witness in the trial against the Cypher Syndicate, and the world was watching. The courtroom fell silent as Zephyr took the stand. His eyes swept across the room, landing on Lyra and Caspian. They sat among the other arrested syndicate members, their prison jumpsuits a far cry from the polished personas they once projected. Lyra's gaze met his, a mixture of defiance and something else, regret perhaps? Caspian, on the other hand, glared with undisguised hatred. Over the next several days, Zephyr's testimony unfolded like a complex algorithm. He presented decrypted communications, detailed financial trails, and played the damning confessions recorded from the rig helicopter. Each piece of evidence was another nail in the syndicate's coffin, exposing the full extent of their operations. The media dubbed it the trial of the century. Zephyr's dual role as victim and hero captivated the public imagination. Despite the intense pressure and scrutiny, he remained composed, his testimony clear and unwavering. During a recess, Zephyr found himself alone in a private chamber, his mind still racing from the morning's cross-examination. The door opened, and Lyra was escorted in by a guard. Her eyes, once so familiar, now seemed to belong to a stranger. "Zephyr," she began, her voice soft, "I know you probably won't believe me, but I need you to know. What I told you on the roof about being pregnant, it wasn't entirely a lie. I thought I was at the time." Zephyr's face remained impassive. "I know the truth, Lyra. I saw your medical records from the hospital after the crash. You were never pregnant." The color drained from Lyra's face as she realized her final deception had been unraveled before it even began. Without another word, she was led away, leaving Zephyr alone with the echoes of her lies. When the verdict finally came down, it fell like a hammer blow. Caspian, identified as a key syndicate operative, was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. Lyra, despite her attempts to paint herself as a reluctant participant, received 25 years. The syndicate's leader, a shadowy figure finally unmasked, was given a life sentence. In the aftermath of the trial, as the dust began to settle, Zephyr found himself at a crossroads. An offer had been extended, the chance to lead a new international cybersecurity task force. It was an opportunity to be at the forefront of preventing future cyber threats, to turn his painful experience into a force for good. As he pondered the decision, Zephyr found himself standing before the NCDA's memorial wall. A new name had been added since he last visited Raven Coe, his friend and colleague. Fatally wounded while protecting him during the final confrontation with the Syndicate, he placed a hand on her name, his touch gentle, almost reverent. "I'll make it count, Raven," he whispered. "I promise." Weeks later, Zephyr stood before the newly formed International Cyber Defense Coalition in Geneva. As he prepared to address the assembly and accept his new role, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The betrayal had nearly broken him, but it had also forged him into someone stronger, someone capable of protecting others from experiencing the same pain. Zephyr stepped up to the podium, his gaze sweeping across the gathered dignitaries and cybersecurity experts. When he spoke, his voice was steady, filled with conviction. "Ladies and gentlemen, the digital realm is our new front line. And on this front line, trust is both our greatest vulnerability and our strongest asset. Today, we start building a safer digital future, a future where betrayal cannot hide in the shadows of cyberspace." As his words resonated through the chamber, Zephyr felt a sense of purpose settle over him. He had transformed his personal tragedy into a powerful drive for global cybersecurity. The echoes of betrayal that had once threatened to destroy him had become the foundation of a new era of digital defense. In that moment, as he looked out over the faces of those who would join him in this fight, Zephyr Blackwood knew that this was just the beginning. The battle for the future of cyberspace lay ahead, and he was ready to lead the charge. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
Michael visited his friend David's house and met a stunningly beautiful woman there. Despite her age, she was energetic and charming, and she turned out to be David's sister-in-law. They were having a good time together. "Michael, how many years has it been? I was wondering if you were still alive. It's great to see you. Why has it been so long since we last talked? You hung up too quickly the last time we spoke, so we couldn't catch up. Let's talk all night at my place today. Don't even think about going home," David said. As Michael entered David's house, he was taken aback. He had never been to such a clean and well-decorated home before. None of Michael's friends were financially well off. They were all living paycheck to paycheck, and many were small business owners. Most had homes, but they were heavily burdened by mortgage payments. David, however, seemed to have received significant support from his wealthy parents. He was running a manufacturing business that supplied to large corporations and seemed to be making a lot of money. Standing next to David was a woman about 5'5", tall with a slim build. Michael didn't recognize her from the wedding and quietly asked, "Who is she?" David explained that she was his wife's sister, Emily, and quickly pulled Michael inside. David's wife had passed away a year ago due to complications during kidney dialysis. Michael felt awkward for asking and offered his condolences, saying, "I'm sorry for your loss." David responded that he was doing okay now and gave a bittersweet smile, which made Michael feel sorry for him. David, Michael, and Emily sat down together to enjoy the meal Emily had prepared. Just as they were about to have a light beer, David received a call from his factory manager. There was a problem with a machine, and he was urgently needed at the factory. David apologized. "Sorry, there's a large order coming up next week, and I need to check the machines. The equipment company is on their way, but it'll take some time. I'm really sorry, but please don't leave. Okay?" With that, he left in a hurry. Michael awkwardly started drinking beer with Emily. After a few moments of uncomfortable silence and with some alcohol in his system, Michael finally broke the ice. "Where is David's son? Is David living here alone?" he asked. I remember coming over to David's place after hearing he got married and had a son. I spent a lot of time playing with his kid, Emily, sipping on a beer, shared. "I went to my grandma's for the holiday weekend. I'll be heading back home tomorrow. Since Dad can't manage alone, I sometimes come over to help out with homework and chores." Emily began to open up about how things changed dramatically after her kind-hearted younger sibling passed away unexpectedly. She mentioned how she's been single and running her own business, finding it too tough to raise her son alone, without enough time for household tasks, and occasionally asking for help with the housework. David had married a woman from a reputable family after graduating from a top university, and they started their married life in a house gifted by their parents. A year later, they were blessed with a handsome son. Michael, who was single at the time, found David's son adorable and often bought him gifts. Whenever David invited him over, Michael would insist on having the son come along too. However, today, David's son wasn't there, and instead, there was someone referred to as a sister-in-law, leaving Michael at a loss for words. Emily asked Michael if he was married, prompting him to share his story. He had barely enjoyed 3 years of a dreamy, married life when his wife had an accident and passed away a few days later. Emily, looking sympathetic, held Michael's hand. Being 3 years older than Michael, Emily looked significantly younger than her age, which made Michael feel a special fondness for her. After losing his wife, Michael had tried his hand at various endeavors, both earning and losing money. He now ran an online shop, specializing in custom lettering balloons and cake toppers, which piqued Emily's interest. She mentioned her office work had slowed down and asked if he could teach her the trade. They exchanged contact information and continued drinking until David hurried back home. Emily returned to her place, and after drinking with David, Michael woke up late the next day. Stretching, he walked out of his room, only to see Emily rushing to the kitchen, embarrassed. "Did you come again?" she asked. "I was worried after you guys drank together, so I came to make breakfast," she explained. Michael told David, "Your sister-in-law seems like a warm person. It's reassuring to know she takes good care of your nephew." Since they lived in the same area, they agreed to meet often. A few days later, Michael taught Emily how to make lettering balloons and toppers. Confident in her marketing skills, Emily began promoting her new skills through various channels. "I worked on my own, taking orders until I started a business with Emily's help, and things began to grow from there. We even got a group order and were featured on a TV show. My relationship with Emily started to improve significantly. Meeting Emily, who is quick-handed and has a knack for business, was a stroke of luck, and I made sure to give her a bonus. Despite her age, Emily was still beautiful and lovely. I felt empty if I didn't talk to her even for a day. As work increased, I bought a small bed for my office, thinking it would be useful for taking naps when tired. Little did I know it would come in handy for such good occasions. After our business was featured on a TV show about successful entrepreneurs, Emily and I received countless calls from acquaintances, and we were too busy to even think about eating out. We ordered some snacks from a delivery service and continued working until we fell asleep on the bed, only to be awakened by the sound of the door opening. It was Emily, coming over with a cake. Life has been so enjoyable lately, all thanks to you, she confessed. And we decided to take a break from work and enjoy some quality time together, laughing shyly, unable to remember the last time we had such a moment. I met Emily through David and went to see him. Actually, I've been seeing your sister-in-law. Meeting Emily that day was a stroke of luck for me. Thanks to you, my business is doing well, and I've met a wonderful woman, I said with a smile. However, David felt upset because he had feelings for his sister-in-law and was struggling with when to confess to her. But he decided to keep his feelings for her a secret from me until the end.
Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Cheating Tales Lab. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know one fact about your city or town that only local would know. Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. Herbert Gregory's polished Oxford shoes clicked against the marble floor of Maxwell Industries' executive wing, his reflection crisp in the spotless surface beneath. At 45, he cut an imposing figure, 6'2", shoulders straight from his college rowing days, and a jawline that hadn't softened despite his corporate success. The morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows caught the silver threading through his dark hair, adding gravitas to his appearance rather than age. "Good morning, Mr. Gregory," called out junior executives as he passed, their eager smiles masking calculation. He nodded, maintaining the perfect balance of accessibility and authority he'd cultivated over his 15-year rise through the ranks. As senior executive vice president overseeing a $2 billion division, he'd learned that perception was currency in these halls. His secretary Candace Matthews stood as he approached his office, her blonde hair pulled back in its usual severe bun. "Your 9 a.m. was pushed to 10, sir." Mr. Delgado requested the change. Something flickered behind her eyes. Concern? Fear? Before she smoothed her expression. "James needs to learn that reorganizing my schedule doesn't make him more important," Herbert remarked, noting how Candace flinched at the mention of the vice president's name. "Any other changes I should know about?" Mrs. Gregory called. "She'll be attending the Maxwell Foundation dinner tonight after all. She said she made some promising connections at last week's charity auction." Herbert paused at his office door. Christina had originally begged off tonight's event, claiming a migraine. Did she now? Interesting. He caught Candace's reflection in the glass, saw her hands trembling slightly as she arranged papers on her desk. "Thank you, Candace. Hold my calls until the Delgado meeting." Inside his office, Herbert settled behind his mahogany desk, the Manhattan skyline spread before him like a kingdom. His recent promotions had come surprisingly easily, too easily, perhaps. The thought nagged at him as he reviewed quarterly projections, his mind drifting to Christina's sudden interest in corporate networking. A knock interrupted his musings. Philip Summers, Maxwell Industries owner and Herbert's mentor, filled the doorway with his commanding presence. At 70, the billionaire industrialist moved with the energy of a man half his age. "Got a minute, Herbert?" Philip's steel-gray eyes swept the office. "Walk with me." They rode the private elevator to the rooftop garden, Philip's preferred location for sensitive conversations. The autumn wind whipped at their suit jackets as they strolled past meticulously maintained topiaries. "Your division's numbers are impressive," Philip began, "but something feels off. James Delgado's been making noise about irregularities in contract negotiations." Herbert's spine stiffened. "James has been difficult since my last promotion." Difficult is one word for it. Philip stopped, turning to face his proc. "I've been watching him." "And your wife, Christina?" Herbert kept his voice neutral, though his pulse quickened. "She's become quite the social butterfly at company events. Very friendly with certain executives." Philip's expression hardened. "I'm conducting a quiet investigation. Trust no one until it's complete. Not even those closest to you." The warning hung in the crisp autumn air. Herbert nodded, pieces clicking into place. Candace's strange behavior, Christina's newfound networking enthusiasm, James's barely concealed smugness during meetings. "Thank you for the heads up," Herbert said carefully. I assume you'll let me know what you find? You'll be the first to know. Philip clapped him on the shoulder. Your CEO material, Herbert. Don't let anyone compromise that. Back in his office, Herbert observed the daily drama of corporate life with new eyes. He watched James Delgado swagger past his door, caught the predatory gleam in the vice president's dark eyes. James was handsome in a conventional way, tall, dark, gym-sculpted physique obvious even in bespoke suits. The kind of man who peaked in college and never got over it. Mr. Gregory? Candace appeared in his doorway. Your son's school called. Lucas won his debate competition. Excellent. Herbert allowed himself a moment of genuine pride. At 14, Lucas showed promise of surpassing both his parents intellectually. And Amy? Still maintaining her 4.0 GPA. According to Mrs. Gregory's update this morning, Candace shifted uncomfortably. Sir, about tonight's meeting with the Asian investors. What about it? The conference room's being renovated. Unexpectedly. Perhaps you should reschedule? Herbert studied his secretary's face. 10 years of loyal service, and suddenly she couldn't meet his eyes. No need. We'll use my office. But sir, my office will be fine, Candace. His tone left no room for argument. She retreated, defeat evident in her shoulders. The day unfolded like a chess match. Herbert noticed Christina's perfume lingering in the executive washroom hours after her supposed lunch meeting with potential donors. He observed James adjusting his tie with unusual satisfaction after emerging from the same area. Small details, easily dismissed individually, formed a damning pattern. During the afternoon board meeting, Herbert watched Christina and James through hooded eyes. His wife of 18 years sat 3 seats down, her auburn hair catching the light as she leaned forward to make a point about community engagement. At 42, she still turned heads, something she'd been leveraging more frequently at corporate events. James reached for the water pitcher at the same moment as Christina. Their fingers brushed, lingered. A smile passed between them, intimate and knowing. Herbert's mouth tightened imperceptibly. The Williams contract, Herbert interrupted their moment, seems to have been processed unusually quickly. James, perhaps you could explain the expedited timeline? James's smile faltered slightly. Just good networking, Herbert. You know how it is. Right connections, right time. Indeed. Herbert let the word hang there, heavy with unspoken meaning. After the meeting, Christina touched his arm. Darling, I'll meet you at the foundation dinner. James mentioned some concerns about the Asian market that I'd like to discuss first. Of course. Herbert kissed her cheek, catching the faint scent of unfamiliar cologne. Don't be too late. You know how Philip values punctuality. He worked later than usual that Thursday, reviewing files with methodical precision. At 8:45 p.m., Candace burst into his office without knocking. Sir, you can't, the cleaning crew needs access. And the ventilation system. Herbert rose slowly. Move aside, Candace. Please, Mr. Gregory. Just go home. Please. He caught the desperation in her voice, the genuine fear. Not for him, he realized. For herself. Consider this your only chance at redemption, he said quietly. What you do in the next minute determines your future at this company. Tears welled in her eyes as she stepped aside. Herbert strode past her, following the sound of muffled laughter to his private office. He paused at the door, hand on the handle, gathering his considerable self-control. The scene inside confirmed every suspicion. Christina straddled James in Herbert's executive chair, her designer dress hiked up indecently. Files lay scattered across the desk, sensitive documents that had no business being exposed. Well, Herbert's voice cut through their startled gasps. This explains the irregular contract processing. James recovered first, his face twisting into a sneer. Your wife's been earning your promotions for years, Gregory. Better keep quiet if you want to keep this cushy job. Who'd believe you over 2 witnesses anyway? Christina's laugh held years of hidden contempt. The kid's private school? All thanks to my extra hours. You're such a loser. James is twice the man you'll ever be. Herbert's smile, cold, confident, predatory, stopped their gloating cold. He reached past them to his desk, pressing a single button with deliberate precision. Too late, he he said softly. The company owner just saw everything. Now whose job is at risk? The blood drained from James's face as he realized the boardroom's live stream had been activated. Christina scrambled off his lap, stumbling in her haste. Herbert, baby, we can explain, she began. Save it for the lawyers, Christina. Herbert straightened his tie, his composure magnificent in its totality. I believe you'll find your access cards have already been deactivated. Security will escort you out. As if on cue, 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. Herbert noted with satisfaction that Philip had chosen his largest personnel for the task. Mr. Delgado, Mrs. Gregory, one guard announced, please come with us. James stood, attempting to salvage some dignity. This isn't over, Herbert. Oh, but it is. Herbert settled into his chair, after wiping it thoroughly with his pocket square. You see, Philip Summers doesn't appreciate people manipulating his company, or his chosen successor. Christina froze halfway to the door. Successor? Did James not mention that part? Philip's been grooming me for CEO. Not that you'll be around to enjoy the perks. Herbert turned to his computer, dismissing them. Candace, please come in here. We have some paperwork to process. The secretary slipped past the disgraced couple, clutching a folder to her chest. In the doorway, Christina turned back one last time. The children, she started, will learn a valuable lesson about integrity. Herbert cut her off. Goodbye, Christina. Do remember to return your company car, the one you used to drive to your networking meetings. The security guards led them away, their footsteps fading down the marble hallway. Herbert watched their reflection disappear in the window, Manhattan's lights twinkling behind him like witnesses to his triumph. Sir? Candace's voice quavered. I'm so sorry. They blackmailed me. James threatened my job, my reputation. I know. Herbert's tone softened slightly. That's why you're still here. But Candace? Never lie to me again. She nodded frantically. Never, Mr. Gregory. I swear. Good. Now, let's begin the termination paperwork. I believe we have quite a bit of cleaning up to do. As Candace pulled up the necessary forms, Herbert's phone buzzed with a message from Philip. Well handled. Meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. Bring a list of James's contracts for review. Herbert allowed himself a small smile as he typed his response. The game wasn't over. It was merely entering a new phase. And Herbert Gregory had always been very, very good at games. Outside his office, Manhattan's corporate warriors continued their endless dance of ambition and betrayal. But tonight, a new player had emerged victorious. Not through manipulation or deceit, but through patience, intelligence, and the perfect poker face. The night janitor, passing by with his cart, heard something unusual from the corner office. Laughter. Low, controlled, and just a touch triumphant. Dawn hadn't yet broken over Manhattan when Philip Summers convened the emergency board meeting. Herbert sat at his right hand, expression carved from granite as security footage played on the boardroom's massive screen. The night cleaning crew had barely finished wiping down the executive floor, yet Maxwell Industries' highest echelons were already assembling for what would become known as the Thursday Morning Massacre. I apologize for the early hour, Philip addressed the bleary-eyed board members. But this couldn't wait. He nodded to his head of security, who distributed thick folders marked confidential to each attendee. The footage showed James and Christina in various compromising positions throughout the building over months. More damning were the recorded conversations about contract manipulation, kickbacks, and their planned embezzlement scheme. Jesus Christ, muttered the CFO, flipping through financial records. They've been cooking the books for years. James's corporate allies shifted uncomfortably in their seats, distancing themselves physically and metaphorically from the empty chair where their ringleader usually sat. Herbert noticed several of them wouldn't meet his eyes. This stops now. Philip's voice cut through the murmurs. Mr. Delgado and Mrs. Gregory have been escorted from the premises. Their electronic access is revoked. Their offices are being swept for evidence as we speak. One board member, Thomas Chun, raised his hand. What about Herbert's promotions? If they were influenced, already reviewed, Philip gestured to the financial analyst standing by. Ms. Rodriguez, please share your findings. The analyst stepped forward, professional, and precise. Mr. Gregory's performance metrics consistently exceeded expectations. The data shows he would have earned each promotion regardless of any external influence. In fact, evidence suggests attempts were made to delay his advancement to protect Mr. Delgado's position. Herbert maintained his composure, but satisfaction coursed through him. Years of late nights, strategic planning, and relentless dedication had built his success. Christina and James's pathetic scheme had only made his path more difficult. Given these findings, Philip continued, and the obvious leadership vacuum this creates, I'm naming Herbert Gregory CEO of Maxwell Industries, effective immediately. The announcement sparked a mix of reactions, genuine congratulations from some, forced smiles from others. Herbert accepted each with equal grace, already marking who would need watching in the coming months. After the meeting, Philip held Herbert back. There's more. My investigation uncovered something personal you should see. In Philip's private office, they reviewed additional footage. Christina, lounging in James's lap in his office after hours, laughing as they discussed their plans. Poor Herbert, she cooed, running her fingers through James's hair. So focused on his precious metrics. He actually thinks he earned those promotions. James nuzzled her neck. We'll let him keep believing that. Until we're ready to take everything. The kids' trust funds? All part of the plan, baby. We'll drain them dry. Blame Daddy's mismanagement. They'll hate him forever. Herbert's knuckles whitened on his armrest, but his voice remained steady. How long have you been collecting this? 6 months, Philip replied. Started when I noticed irregularities in James's division. Christina was an unexpected bonus. I'm sorry, Herbert. Don't be. You've given me everything I need. Meanwhile, across town, Christina swept into her favorite salon, ready to spin the story her way. She'd barely settled into her chair when her phone exploded with notifications. Her country club membership, suspended. Credit cards, frozen. Social media, flooded with screenshots from the security footage. Mrs. Gregory? The salon owner approached nervously. I'm sorry, but we can't accept your usual house charge anymore. Christina's face flushed as other patrons stared. I'll use my credit card. They're all declining. She fled the salon, her perfectly maintained facade cracking. Her phone rang. James. Baby, don't panic, he started. Don't panic? Everything's frozen. What's happening? Minor setback. My lawyers are working on it. Meet me at Mr. Delgado? A new voice interrupted. This is Detective Morrison, NYPD Financial Crimes. Please hold while we execute our search warrant. The line went dead. Christina stood on the sidewalk, her world imploding in real time. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Herbert. The children have seen everything. Your video messages to James were particularly enlightening. Don't bother coming home. At their private school, Amy and Lucas sat in the headmaster's office, watching their mother's true nature revealed on a laptop screen. Dr. Harrison, the headmaster, looked more disappointed than shocked. Your father has arranged for you to stay in school, she assured them. The board of trustees was quite impressed with his handling of the situation. Lucas, his father's analytical mind evident, asked the practical questions. Are trust funds safe? Dr. Harrison confirmed. They're tied to your father's legitimate earnings. Your mother never had access. Amy wiped tears from her eyes, but her voice was steel. Good. I don't want anything from her. Across the city, James's carefully constructed world crumbled. His corporate allies evaporated. Years of mutual back-scratching forgotten in the face of potential criminal charges. His attempt to access offshore accounts failed. Philip's team had already frozen them. Your previous employers send their regards, Herbert informed him via conference call. They're very interested in reviewing your tenure with them. Especially Norton Corporation, remember them? James's face went ashen. The Norton Corp scandal had been buried years ago, or so he'd thought. You can't prove anything, he blustered. Check your email, James. Your old assistant there was very helpful. Apparently, you had a similar arrangement with the CEO's wife. In the background, James heard Christina screaming as she discovered his other networking partnerships. Her threats of revenge brought a rare smile to Herbert's face. Candace, meanwhile, sat trembling in a conference room with corporate security. They blackmailed me, she explained, handing over printed emails. James threatened to expose my brother's addiction issues. Said he'd make sure he never got treatment. The head of security reviewed the evidence. These timestamps match our investigation timeline. Why come forward now? Because Mr. Gregory showed mercy when he could have destroyed me. I won't waste that chance. Herbert's new CEO office buzzed with activity. Teams of auditors combed through records. Security experts swept for additional surveillance devices, and lawyers prepared documents for multiple cases. Sir? His new secretary, thoroughly vetted, appeared at the door. Your children are here. Amy and Lucas entered, both looking older than their years. Herbert stood, uncertain for the first time that day. Lucas spoke first. Dad, we saw the videos. All of them. I'm sorry you had to see that. Don't be... Amy interrupted. We needed to know the truth. About Mom, about everything. Herbert studied their faces, his daughter's quiet strength, his son's analytical gaze. What do you need from me? Just you, Dad. Lucas stepped forward. The real you. No more pretending everything's perfect. Amy joined her brother. And maybe some self-defense classes. The other kids at school are getting weird. Herbert laughed, genuine warmth breaking through his corporate armor. Done. Anything else? Pizza? They asked in unison. Pizza, he agreed. But first, I need to finish something. After they left, Herbert reviewed the final piece of evidence Philip had provided, footage of Christina coaching James on how to manipulate corporate contracts. Send it to the SEC, he instructed his legal team. All of it. As evening settled over Manhattan, Herbert stood at his office window. Below, protesters gathered, shareholders demanding blood, reporters seeking stories, and among them, he spotted Christina trying to get past security. His phone buzzed. Another desperate message from James, offering to explain everything. Herbert deleted it without reading further. His new office, 10 floors above his old one, offered a perfect view of his domain. Not bad for a loser. Mr. Gregory? His secretary's voice came through the intercom. The FBI is here for their appointment. Herbert straightened his tie, a predator's smile playing at his lips. Send them in. And Sarah? Order dinner. This might take a while. The sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of victory. In his reflection, Herbert saw what Christina and James never had. A man who'd built his success on steel and strategy, not seduction and schemes. Their betrayal hadn't weakened him. It had simply revealed his true strength. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, restructuring divisions, reassuring investors, rebuilding trust. But tonight, Herbert Gregory would savor the sweetest success of all, the complete and utter destruction of those who'd underestimated him. In the lobby, Christina made one last attempt to reach him. Please, I can explain everything. Security guided her out as Herbert's response came via text. Save it for your deposition. The media dubbed it the Maxwell meltdown, but Herbert preferred Philip's term. Corporate Darwinism. In the end, it wasn't the strongest who survived, but the most honest. Who knew integrity could be such a powerful weapon? As the city lights blinked on, Herbert reviewed tomorrow's agenda. Board restructuring, SEC meetings, family dinner with the kids. A full day, but he wouldn't have it any other way. After all, empires weren't built by taking days off. His phone buzzed one final time. Philip. Well done, son. Ready for day 2? Herbert's reply was simple. Born ready. Let them call it a scandal. He called it justice. And justice, served cold in a corner office with a view, tasted absolutely perfect. The Securities and Exchange Commission has launched a formal investigation into Maxwell Industries. The CNBC anchor's voice filled Herbert Gregory's office as he reviewed the latest forensic accounting reports. His signature appeared decisive and sharp on each document, authorizing full cooperation with federal authorities. Turn it up, he instructed his assistant as the story continued. Sources confirmed that former Vice President James Delgado's alleged fraud extends beyond Maxwell Industries. Multiple companies report similar schemes dating back nearly 2 decades. Herbert's phone buzzed, a text from the SEC's lead investigator. You were right about Norton Corporation. The pattern matches exactly. The investigation had taken on a life of its own. What began as an internal corporate matter had exploded into one of Wall Street's most shocking scandals. Herbert's methodical exposure of James's past had revealed a pattern so extensive it triggered investigations at 5 major corporations. Special Agent Sarah Martinez strode into his office, tablet in hand. "Mr. Gregory, we've mapped Mr. Delgado's complete network. Your wife's involvement proved crucial. She kept detailed records." "Of course she did," Herbert replied, unsurprised. Christina never could resist insurance policies. The agent swiped through documents on her tablet. She recorded everything. Every deal, every encounter. But here's where it gets interesting. She also recorded other executives' wives involved in similar arrangements. The private school mothers, Herbert concluded. The agent nodded. Your wife's social climbing had an unexpected benefit. She collected dirt on everyone she met. Apparently, James's scheme was larger than even he knew. She was building her own leverage. A knock interrupted them. Philip Summers entered, looking grimmer than usual. "James is making a run for it." Private jet filed a flight plan to Venezuela. Herbert's smile was cold. Let him try. Across town, James Delgado hurried across the private airfield, carry-on clutched tight. The sleek Gulfstream waited, engines humming. He'd liquidated what accounts he could still access, enough for a comfortable life somewhere without extradition. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Delgado," the pilot greeted him. "Weather looks clear to Caracas." James settled into the leather seat, accepting a glass of champagne. "Take off as soon as possible." The jet taxied, lifted off, and landed 2 hours later at JFK International, surrounded by federal agents. "The pilot?" James demanded as they led him away in handcuffs. "Has been on Mr. Summers' payroll longer than you have," an agent informed him cheerfully. "Nice try, though." Christina's downfall proved equally spectacular. Her attempt to leverage her recordings of other school mothers backfired catastrophically. Instead of buying silence, it bought her complete social excommunication. "Did you really think we wouldn't compare notes?" Miranda Chen, the board chairman's wife, confronted her at her last school fundraiser appearance. "We've all received your little blackmail hints." "Well, guess what? We chose honesty." Christina looked around the room, seeing only hostile faces. These women, once her social circle, now formed a wall of contempt. "Our husbands have all disclosed everything," Miranda continued. "The school board knows. The companies know. Your leverage is gone. You'll all go down with me," Christina threatened. "No, we won't. Because unlike you, we're actually sorry. We've made amends. You're still trying to profit from it." Later that week, Christina stood outside the massive iron gates of her former home, pressing the intercom repeatedly. "Herbert, we need to talk about the children." His voice came through, cool and professional. "Any communication needs to go through my lawyers. Think of the children," she pleaded, voice breaking. "They need their mother. They needed a mother 16 years ago. What they got was a sociopath who mocked their father and planned to steal their trust funds." "Goodbye, Christina." The gates remained closed. Through them, she watched Amy and Lucas exit the house, heading to their father's waiting car. Neither looked in her direction. Inside his home office that evening, Herbert reviewed a different kind of document, Amy's college application essay. The title caught his attention. "Integrity in the Face of Betrayal. Is it too personal?" Amy asked from the doorway. "Princeton's my dream school, but if you think it's too much." Herbert read the opening paragraph, pride swelling. His daughter had transformed their family crisis into a powerful meditation on ethics and resilience. "It's perfect," he assured her. "Raw, honest, and strong. Just like you." Lucas appeared behind his sister, tablet in hand. "Dad, the TEDx organizers confirmed my slot. Surviving Family Betrayal, a Teenager's Guide to Moral Courage." Herbert studied his children. Amy's quiet strength, Lucas's analytical mind. They'd emerged from the crisis not as victims, but as advocates for integrity. Months later, Herbert stood at the podium accepting the CEO of the Year award. The audience included his children, Philip, and faces from every phase of his career. Success built on lies falls under its own weight. He began his speech. Success built on truth rises above all betrayal. I learned this lesson the hard way, but it was worth every moment. In the maximum security wing of a federal prison, James Delgado opened his mail to find photos of the ceremony. Herbert's success splashed across business magazines. The children's achievements highlighted in social pages. His empire, built on quicksand, had collapsed. Herbert's, built on bedrock, soared. James picked up a pen, beginning another letter begging forgiveness. Like the others, it would go unanswered. Christina folded clothes at her retail job, watching her former friends shop without acknowledging her. Through the store window, she could see Maxwell Industries Tower dominating the skyline. Somewhere up there, Herbert was thriving without her. Her manager approached. "Stockroom needs organizing." "That's your job now." She nodded, adding it to her list of menial tasks. Her divorce settlement had barely covered her legal fees. The prenup, ironically insisted upon by her own parents, had proven airtight. In a smaller but respectable firm across town, Candace completed her immunity-granted testimony. Her new job wasn't as prestigious as Maxwell Industries, but it came with something better: peace of mind. She sealed an envelope containing her annual thank-you note to Herbert. His mercy had given her a second chance, one she'd earned through honesty. Herbert's new corner office, 10 floors above his old one, offered a perfect view of his domain. Maxwell Industries had doubled in value under his leadership. New ethics policies made it a model of corporate governance. Philip had granted him equity partnership, making official what everyone already knew. Herbert Gregory represented the company's future. On his desk, next to family photos and industry awards, sat a simple frame. Inside, the security footage still, Christina sneering, "You're such a loser." Below it, his CEO of the Year award inscription, "To those who choose integrity over easy success." The same footage now opened every corporate ethics training session. New employees watched the scene unfold, learning that integrity wasn't just a buzzword at Maxwell Industries. It was the foundation of their success. Amy's acceptance letter from Princeton hung beside Lucas's viral TEDx talk statistics. His children had transformed trauma into triumph, their story inspiring others to choose truth over convenience. Herbert's phone buzzed. A message from Philip. "Dinner tonight? Might be time to discuss your chairman transition." He smiled, typing his response. The view from his office showed Manhattan spread before him, but his real achievement sat in that simple frame. Proof that sometimes the best revenge is living well. And living well, he discovered, meant living true. In the end, Christina had been right about one thing. James was twice the man Herbert would ever be. Twice as corrupt, twice as weak, twice as deserving of his fall. Herbert Gregory had built his empire on steel and stone, not sand and schemes. Let the world call it a scandal. He called it justice. And justice, served from a corner office with a view, had never tasted sweeter. 5 years later, the price of betrayal. The fluorescent lights of Macy's Herald Square buzzed overhead as Christina Gregory, now Christina Martinez after her second failed marriage, folded another stack of designer clothes she once would have bought without a second thought. At 47, her carefully maintained appearance couldn't quite hide the bitterness etched around her mouth or the desperate gleam in her eyes. "Martinez." Customer complaint in fitting room 3, her 20-something supervisor called out, barely concealing her satisfaction at ordering around a woman who had once hosted galas in Manhattan penthouses. Christina hurried to the fitting room, only to freeze at the sight of Miranda Chen trying on a Versace dress. The board chairman's wife, still a fixture in the social circles Christina had been exiled from, didn't bother hiding her smirk. "Oh, how fitting," Miranda commented, adjusting the designer dress. "Could you fetch this in a size smaller? The holiday collection is divine this year." "Not that you'd know." Working in the regular section, Christina swallowed her retort, remembering her last warning about being rude to customers. Her retail salary barely covered the rent on her Queens studio apartment. She couldn't afford another incident. "Right away, ma'am," she managed, ducking out to the stockroom. Through the store's windows, Maxwell Industries Tower dominated the skyline, a daily reminder of everything she'd lost. Her phone buzzed, another rejection from a headhunter. "Given your history with Maxwell Industries, "We don't feel you'd be a good fit." They never said it directly, but her name had become toxic in corporate circles. The scandal had its own Wikipedia page now. Across town, in a maximum security federal prison, James Delgado stared at the latest newspaper article about Maxwell Industries' unprecedented growth. His prison-issued reading glasses couldn't quite focus on the smaller text, but Herbert Gregory's photo was sharp enough, accepting some international business award, looking even more distinguished with silver temples. "Still obsessing over your old company, Delgado?" his cellmate asked. "That's what, 15 years left on your sentence." 12 with good behavior, James corrected automatically, though they both knew white-collar criminals rarely served full terms. Still, the SEC had made an example of him. His pattern of corporate fraud, spanning decades and multiple companies, had become a cautionary tale taught in business schools. His last appeal had been denied 6 months ago. The evidence had been overwhelming: Christina's detailed records, Candace's testimony, the paper trail at Norton Corporation. His corporate allies had turned state's evidence, each racing to save themselves. His prison account held exactly $127.43. The government had seized everything else: houses, cars, investments. Even his designer suits had been auctioned off to pay restitution. The cheap prison uniform chafed both his skin and his ego. A guard appeared with mail call. "Delgado, another return to sender. Gregory's office still won't accept your letters." James crumpled his latest attempt at apologizing. Or more accurately, attempting to manipulate his way back into some position of influence. Herbert's response never varied. All communication must go through lawyers. Meanwhile, in Princeton's prestigious Gothic halls, Amy Gregory's thesis on corporate ethics was creating waves. At 21, she'd already been featured in business journals, her unique perspective on corporate culture shaped by personal experience. "Your case study on Maxwell Industries' transformation is exceptional," her advisor praised. "The comparison between fear-based compliance and integrity-driven ethics is particularly insightful." Amy smiled, adjusting her laptop to show her latest research. "I've been interviewing executives who lived through the transition. The cultural shift after my father implemented the new policies was apparently remarkable." Her phone lit up with a text from Lucas, now a freshman at Harvard. "Guess who asked me to give another TED Talk? This time they want both of us. Surviving Betrayal: A Family's Journey to Truth." Lucas's first TEDx talk had gone viral, spawning a youth movement focused on moral courage and family resilience. At 19, he'd already published a book aimed at helping teenagers navigate family crises. The advance had gone to a foundation supporting children of families broken by corporate fraud. Their mother's occasional attempts at contact, usually around holidays or their birthdays, went unanswered. Her social media stalking had revealed her children's successes, but she remained blocked from directly reaching them. Her last Christmas card had been returned unopened, her tearful voicemail deleted unheard. Across the city, Candace Wilson, N.E. Matthews, reviewed quarterly reports in her new office. The smaller firm she joined after her immunity deal had promoted her to chief of staff, appreciating both her experience and her hard-learned lessons about integrity. She sealed her annual thank you note to Herbert, 5 years of gratitude for the mercy that had given her a second chance. Her testimony had helped build the federal case against James and Christina, while her documented blackmail experience had shaped Maxwell Industries' new whistleblower protection policies. Her brother, whose addiction James had threatened to expose, now ran a successful recovery program. Herbert's quiet assistance with treatment costs had saved not just her career, but her family. In Maxwell Industries' executive floor, now 20 stories higher than his original office, Herbert Gregory reviewed the latest expansion plans. At 50, he'd fully grown into his power, his reputation for ethical leadership making him one of Wall Street's most respected figures. Philip Summers, though officially retired, still kept an office down the hall. Their mentor-proc relationship had evolved into a deep friendship, their shared vision of corporate integrity reshaping industry standards. The Harvard Business Review wants to do another piece, Herbert's assistant mentioned. They're calling Maxwell's transformation a template for ethical corporate reform. Herbert nodded, glancing at the framed security footage still on his wall. Christina's sneer forever captured in mid-insult. The frame's inscription had become the company's unofficial motto. Success built on lies falls under its own weight. Success built on truth rises above all betrayal. The scandal had sparked a revolution in corporate governance. Maxwell's ethics training program, built around the security footage and subsequent investigation, was now licensed to corporations worldwide. Business schools used the case study to teach crisis management and ethical leadership. Herbert's phone buzzed, a message from Amy. "Dad, Lucas and I want to contribute a chapter to your book. Our perspective on how ethical leadership starts at home." His children had emerged from the crisis stronger, their understanding of integrity shaped by watching him choose truth over convenience, justice over revenge. Their success, Amy's academic achievements, Lucas's advocacy work, meant more than any corporate victory. A calendar alert reminded him of tomorrow's board meeting. Maxwell's value had tripled under his leadership, but more importantly, its culture had been transformed. The fear-based hierarchy James had built had been replaced by transparent processes and clear accountability. Christina's last desperate attempt at contact had come 6 months ago, a tear-stained letter begging for help finding a better job. Her third engagement had fallen through when the wealthy widower's family had Googled her name. Her retail position remained her only option, her reputation permanently stained by her own choices. James's prison writings, smuggled out and posted online by a sympathetic guard, revealed a man still attempting to justify his actions. His claims of being misunderstood and unfairly persecuted only reinforced the justice of his downfall. The private school mothers who'd once followed Christina's lead had rebuilt their lives through honesty. Miranda Chun now led ethics seminars for corporate spouses, turning her experience into a cautionary tale about moral compromise. Herbert's new wife, a brilliant federal prosecutor he'd met during the SEC investigation, shared his commitment to integrity. Their relationship, built on mutual respect and shared values, stood in sharp contrast to his sham of a first marriage. The annual Maxwell Industries Charity Gala, once Christina's social playground, now focused on supporting whistleblower protection and corporate ethics initiatives. The guest list notably excluded anyone involved in the scandal, their absence a reminder that social consequences outlasted legal ones. Looking out over Manhattan's skyline, Herbert reflected on the 5 years since the scandal. His empire had risen from the ashes of betrayal, stronger for having been tested. The price of truth had been high, but the rewards proved immeasurable. In Queens, Christina finished her shift, walking past Maxwell's illuminated tower on her way to the subway. In prison, James stared at his ceiling, counting days until a parole hearing that would likely deny him again. Their betrayal had cost them everything: wealth, status, family, freedom. But in his corner office, Herbert Gregory smiled at his children's latest achievements, his company's continued growth, his life's complete vindication. The security footage still played at every new employee orientation. Christina's words now a punchline: "You're such a loser." Time had revealed the true losers in this game of corporate chess. Success built on lies had indeed fallen under its own weight. Success built on truth had risen above all betrayal. And in Manhattan's glittering canyons of power, that truth still echoed. Integrity, once proven, outweighed all the schemes of lesser players. The price of betrayal proved steeper than any of them had imagined. The rewards of integrity proved greater than anyone had dreamed. And Herbert Gregory, once mocked as a loser, had won the only game that truly mattered, the one played for keeps.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Cheating Tales Lab. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know, what part of the world are you watching from right now? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. The late autumn sun cast long shadows through Melvin Britton's home office window as he sat at his desk, reviewing client specifications for a new security system implementation. His headphones rested comfortably on his ears, a habit from his corporate surveillance days, though no music played through them. Working from home on Wednesdays had become his cherished routine, a perk of his senior position at TechGuard Solutions. The house sat quiet, save for the gentle hum of his computer and the occasional notification ping from his dual monitors. Family photos lined his desk. Nathan's Little League victory, their fishing trip to Lake Tahoe, and Dana beaming at their 10th anniversary party last year. Melvin glanced at his watch, 2:45 p.m. Nathan would be home from middle school soon. The distant sound of a car door closing caught his attention. Through his window, he spotted Dana's white Mercedes pulling into the driveway. Unusual. She typically worked late at Hanson Reality on Wednesdays, often closing deals with clients who couldn't meet during regular hours. The front door opened and closed, followed by the familiar sound of Nathan's backpack hitting the kitchen counter, a habit Melvin had tried unsuccessfully to break. "Hey, sweetie," Dana's voice carried through the partially open office door. "How was school today?" "Pretty good," Nathan replied. "Got an A on my science project. The one about renewable energy? That's wonderful. Your Uncle Ricky will be so proud when I tell him. He's always asking about your grades, you know." Melvin's fingers paused over his keyboard. Something in Dana's tone made his instincts, honed from years of security consulting, prickle with awareness. He reached for his phone, opening the recording app, another habit from his corporate days that had served him well. "Mom." Nathan's voice dropped lower, hesitant. "Uncle Ricky called me again yesterday. On my cell." "He did? What did you talk about?" "Just stuff. School. Basketball. But he said something weird. About how he wishes he could spend more time with me." There was a pause, followed by the sound of kitchen cabinets opening and closing. "Your uncle loves you very much, Nathan. Sometimes family relationships are complicated. Is that why he keeps sending me those expensive gifts?" Dad seemed kind of annoyed about the new gaming laptop, the clink of glasses on the counter. "Your father doesn't understand certain things. Speaking of Ricky, he's been asking about you again." More than usual. Melvin's jaw tightened. His brother's excessive interest in Nathan had always struck him as odd, but he dismissed it as Ricky compensating for not having children of his own. "Mom, why does Uncle Ricky care so much? Sometimes it's like he thinks he's my dad or something." The silence that followed felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken truths. Melvin's finger hovered over the recording app's stop button, but something kept it in place. "Sit down, sweetheart," Dana said finally. "There's something we need to discuss. Something I've been meaning to tell you for a while." The scrape of kitchen chairs against hardwood flooring. Melvin could picture them at the breakfast nook, where they'd shared countless family meals. "Your Uncle Ricky, he's not just your uncle. Dana's voice caught. "He's your real father." The words hit Melvin like a physical blow. His hand gripped his phone tighter, knuckles white against the black case. But Dad." "Melvin, your father, Melvin, he's been good to us. Very good. But there are things you don't know about what happened before you were born. Before I married him." Through the crack in his office door, Melvin caught a glimpse of Dana pulling Nathan into a hug. His son, or was he, looked shell-shocked, his 12-year-old face pale and confused. Nathan pulled away from his mother's embrace, his young face contorted with a mix of confusion and distress. "I don't understand. How could Uncle Ricky be my real dad?" Dana smoothed her perfectly styled hair, a gesture Melvin had once found endearing but now seemed calculated. "It's complicated, sweetie. Before I married your dad, before Melvin, Ricky and I had something special." In his office, Melvin's breathing remained steady, controlled, even as his world tilted on its axis. Years of handling crisis situations had taught him the value of staying calm under pressure. The recording continued, capturing every word. "What do you mean, special?" Nathan's voice cracked slightly. "We were in love, deeply in love. But timing wasn't right. Ricky was starting his business ventures, traveling constantly. I needed stability, a settled life. And Melvin, he could provide that. So you just used Dad? For stability?" The hurt in Nathan's voice mirrored the sharp pain in Melvin's chest. "No, honey, it wasn't like that." "Not entirely." Dana's tone shifted, becoming more defensive. "Your father, Melvin, he's a good man, dependable, safe. But Ricky and we never stopped loving each other. We just had to be practical." The sound of pacing footsteps echoed through the kitchen. This doesn't make sense, Mom. If Uncle Ricky is my real dad, why did you marry Dad? Why keep it a secret? Because sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions. For their future. For their children's future. A chair scraped across the floor again. Look at me, Nathan. Everything I've done, everything we've done, has been to secure the best life possible for you. Does Dad know? A bitter laugh escaped Dana's lips. No, and he can't know. Not yet. The timing still isn't right. Mom, why can't we just tell Dad the truth? He deserves to know. Sweetie, timing is everything in life. I learned that in real estate, and it applies here too. Dana's voice took on a calculating edge that Melvin had never heard before. We have to be smart about this. Your father, Melvin, he's nearly paid off the house. And he's promised to cover your private high school tuition. The pieces clicked into place in Melvin's mind. The frequent late nights at the office. The suspicious text messages he'd glimpsed. His brother's increasingly lavish gifts to Nathan. So what's the plan? Nathan asked, his voice small. Ricky, and I have it all figured out. Once Melvin clears the home loan and sets up your tuition, we'll tell him at Christmas. The divorce settlement will give us everything we need. The house, substantial alimony, child support. Then we can finally be a real family with your true father. Melvin's hands trembled slightly as he saved the recording, his mind already racing through the implications. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was calculated, years in the making. But I don't want a different family, Nathan protested. I love Dad. He's been there for everything. My games, my science fairs, when I was sick. Hush now, Dana cut him off. This is adult business. You'll understand when you're older. For now, you need to keep this between us. Can you do that? For me and Uncle Ricky? The next morning, Melvin sat in a dimly lit booth at Cafe Morrison, far from his usual haunts. Across from him, Ignacio Russell nursed his third espresso of the day. The private investigator's reputation preceded him, methodical, discreet, and ruthlessly effective. I need everything, Melvin stated, sliding a USB drive across the table. The recording is just the beginning. I want bank records, phone logs, travel history, anything that connects my wife and my brother over the past 13 years. Ignacio pocketed the drive without looking at it. Family cases are messy, Mr. Britton. Are you sure you want to pull this thread? They've been pulling threads behind my back for years. Melvin's voice remained steady, but his eyes held a cold determination. I need to know everything before I make my next move. It'll be expensive. Family cases require delicate handling, especially with a minor involved. Money isn't an issue. Melvin pulled out an envelope. This is your retainer. I want daily updates, no matter how small the detail. Over the next weeks, Melvin maintained a perfect facade at home while Ignacio's investigation uncovered layer after layer of deception. The PI's reports arrived encrypted, each one more damning than the last. Look at this, Ignacio said during one of their clandestine meetings, spreading photos across the table. Bali, 12 years ago. 3 weeks before your wedding. The images show Dana and Ricky at a private resort, looking very much like honeymooners. Melvin's stomach churned at the sight of his brother kissing his soon-to-be wife by a private pool. There's a paper trail too, Ignacio continued, pulling out financial records. Regular transfers from your brother to an offshore account in your wife's name. Started right after Nathan was born. Monthly deposits, increasing over time. Melvin studied the bank statements, his security background helping him trace the complex web of transactions. They've been planning this for years. That's not all. Ignacio pulled up property records on his tablet. Your brother purchased a cabin 6 months ago, through an LLC registered in the Cayman Islands. Guess who's been meeting him there twice a month? Security camera footage showed Dana's Mercedes at the cabin's gates, timestamps corresponding with her late nights at the office. What about Nathan? Melvin asked, his voice softening slightly. Any indication they've told him anything else? The kid scared and confused. Been spending more time at the school library, avoiding home. His teachers have noticed a drop in his usual enthusiasm. Ignacio hesitated. There's something else you should know. I did some digging into Dana's past, specifically around the time of Nathan's conception. Melvin looked up sharply. What did you find? There was another man in the picture. Ray Blanchard, Dana's college boyfriend. He was in town during the relevant time frame, about a month before she started seeing your brother. Ray Blanchard? The name stirred a vague memory. Wasn't he killed in a car accident? 10 years ago. Highway collision outside of Portland. Ignacio pushed forward another document. Mr. Britton, have you considered the possibility that neither you nor your brother might be Nathan's biological father? Melvin stared at the document, his mind racing through the implications. I need you to get DNA samples. Discreetly. From all of us. Already ahead of you. Ignacio tapped his tablet. I've made arrangements with a private lab. They're very understanding about chain of custody issues. As Melvin drove home that evening, his thoughts turned to Nathan. Biological truth aside, the boy he'd raised for 12 years was his son in every way that mattered. Dana and Ricky's betrayal was unforgivable, but Nathan was innocent in all this. The house lights were on when he pulled into the driveway. Through the living room window, he could see Dana on the phone, probably with Ricky, planning their Christmas reveal. She had no idea that her carefully constructed house of cards was about to collapse. Melvin touched the encrypted flash drive in his pocket, containing all of Ignacio's evidence. The endgame was approaching, but he needed to be patient, strategic. Dana and Ricky thought they were the chess masters in this game. They were about to learn they weren't the only ones who could play the long game. Ollie Hartman's downtown office radiated calculated power, situated on the 42nd floor of Glass Tower. Persian rugs softened the marble floors, while antique military maps adorned the walls, remnants of his and Melvin's shared past in Army intelligence. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the floor-to-ceiling windows as Melvin watched his friend of 15 years review Ignacio's evidence. Your brother's gotten sloppy, Ollie noted, examining bank statements showing transfers to Dana's hidden account. Using shell companies registered in his girlfriend's name? Amateur hour. Melvin raised an eyebrow. Girlfriend? Jessica Chun, 26. Personal trainer. She thinks Ricky's divorcing his wife. Ollie slid across a surveillance photo showing Ricky with a young Asian woman outside an upscale restaurant. Your brother's building quite the house of cards. Dana knows. Doesn't look like it. She still thinks she's the only one. Ali's fingers drummed against his desk, a tell from their poker nights. The good news? We can protect your assets. The bad news? Your brother's involvement complicates things. Through the window, Melvin watched the city transition into dusk, lights flickering on in surrounding buildings like stars emerging. I want Nathan protected. He's innocent in all this. We can create a trust, Ollie suggested, pulling up documents on his curved monitor. Put the house and investments in it. Make Nathan the beneficiary. They can't touch it in a divorce. But there's more we can do. Ollie outlined an intricate legal strategy that would not only protect Nathan's future, but potentially expose Dana and Ricky's broader financial misconduct. Through their investigation, they discovered Ricky had been using his real estate ventures with Dana to launder money from questionable overseas investments. Your brother's been playing both sides, Ollie explained. The SEC's already sniffing around his latest development project. One anonymous tip about Dana's involvement in the documentation. She's been notarizing fraudulent papers, Melvin realized, remembering the late nights Dana spent catching up on paperwork at her office. Exactly. The trust protects Nathan. The threat of federal investigation keeps them from fighting it. Ali's smile was predatory. They're expecting a simple divorce. They have no idea what's really coming. For the next 2 hours, they constructed a legal fortress around Nathan's future. The trust would cover not only the house and investments, but also provide for his education through graduate school. Special provisions ensured neither Dana nor Ricky could access the funds, even as guardians. What about custody? Melvin asked, his voice tight. Given Nathan's age, the court will consider his preference. But we've got leverage. Ollie pulled out another file. Remember Sandra Mitchell? Dana's former assistant? The one she fired last year? She's willing to testify about Dana's inappropriate relationships with clients. Seems your wife has been mixing business with pleasure beyond just Ricky. The revelation should have hurt, but Melvin felt only cold satisfaction. Every new piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of Dana's planned Christmas performance. Document everything, Ali advised. Every conversation, every interaction. We'll need a clean timeline when this goes to court. And Ricky's girlfriend? Leave Miss Chen to me. She's already suspicious about Ricky's excuses. One anonymous email with proof of his meetings with Dana. Melvin nodded, appreciating the elegance of Ali's strategy. Let their own deceptions become their undoing. The next months unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. While Dana and Ricky plotted their Christmas revelation, Melvin orchestrated his counter-strategy with military precision. Each move was calculated, each interaction scripted to maintain their false sense of security. TechGuard Solutions provided the perfect cover. Melvin scheduled business trips that coincidentally overlapped with Dana's meetings with Ricky, gathering evidence while appearing completely unaware. His security background proved invaluable as he documented their patterns, their lies, their growing carelessness. One crisp November morning, Melvin sat in his parked car outside the mountain cabin, watching Dana's Mercedes disappear down the private road. Once she was gone, he approached the property, his security expertise making quick work of the basic alarm system. Inside, evidence of their betrayal was everywhere. Photos, letters, plans for their post-divorce life together. But it was the laptop left carelessly on the kitchen counter that proved most valuable. Dana had forgotten to log out of her email. That evening, during another tense family dinner, Melvin watched them perform their usual roles while encryption software quietly copied every incriminating document from Dana's phone to his secure server. Nathan's science project won first prize, Ricky announced, playing the proud uncle. Have you considered Brighton Prep for high school? Their STEM program is outstanding. It's quite exclusive, Dana added, shooting Melvin a meaningful look. But Nathan deserves the best education possible, doesn't he, dear? Of course. Melvin took a measured sip of water. Nothing but the best for our son. Later, after Nathan had gone to bed, Dana lingered in the kitchen. I was thinking we should host Christmas this year. Make it really special. Special how? Melvin asked, noting how she unconsciously touched the necklace Ricky had given her. A tell she didn't realize she had. Just special. The whole family together. One last time. The irony almost made him laugh. Instead, he smiled. Whatever you want, dear. It's your show. Meanwhile, the trust took shape behind the scenes. The house, investments, and his controlling interest in TechGuard Solutions were gradually transferred into Nathan's name. Ali's legal expertise ensured every transaction was ironclad, while leaving just enough in joint accounts to avoid suspicion. The paperwork's ready, Ali reported during one of their secure video calls. The trust is established with you as trustee until Nathan turns 25. We've also set up a separate foundation for his education, completely insulated from any divorce proceedings. The hardest part wasn't the legal maneuvering or asset transfers. It was maintaining normalcy with Nathan. The boy was struggling under the weight of his mother's secret, his grades slipping slightly, his usual enthusiasm dimmed. One Saturday, after a particularly tense family breakfast, Melvin took Nathan fishing, their traditional father-son activity since he was 6. Dad, Nathan asked as they sat in their usual spot by the lake, do you ever wish things were different? Melvin caught the tremor in his son's voice. Different how? Just different. Like maybe if you had a different family or a different son. Nathan, look at me. Melvin turned to face the boy who had captured his heart 12 years ago. Family isn't about what we're born into. It's about the choices we make every day. And I choose you. Always. The boy's eyes welled with tears. Even if what? Melvin kept his voice gentle, though he knew exactly what Nathan was struggling to say. Nothing. Nathan looked away. Just, thanks, Dad. December arrived with a bitter cold snap and an unexpected revelation. The DNA test results, delivered to Melvin's private mailbox, confirmed what Ignacio's investigation had suggested. Nathan wasn't his biological son. But the twist, he wasn't Ricky's either. Ray Blanchard, Ignacio explained during their meeting at the cafe. Dana's college sweetheart. He was in town during the conception window, staying at the Grand Marina. Adjacent rooms, 3 nights. Melvin studied the hotel records, his mind racing. The timing fits. But Blanchard died years ago. Car accident outside Portland. 10 years ago this month. Ignacio pushed forward another file. Here's where it gets interesting. Blanchard knew. What? Found his old emails. He confronted Dana right before the accident. Threatened to tell you everything. Ignacio's expression was grim. The crash report noted brake failure. Recently serviced car. Experienced driver. Clear weather. The implication hung heavy in the air. Dana? No proof. But Ricky's company handled Blanchard's life insurance policy. Standard procedure became complicated. Payment delayed for months until Dana provided additional documentation. The pieces clicked into place with terrible clarity. Dana hadn't just betrayed Melvin. She'd orchestrated a complex web of deception spanning years, possibly including Blanchard's death. And Ricky, blinded by his own arrogance, actually believed he was Nathan's father. Does Ricky know about Blanchard? No evidence he does. He's been making plans, private school tours, college savings accounts, all while using your money, of course. Melvin absorbed this information with the detachment his military training had instilled. The trust? Secure. Even if the truth about Blanchard comes out, Nathan's future is protected. That evening, Melvin sat in his home office, reviewing the final pieces of his counter-strategy. The DNA results. The trust documents. The evidence of Dana and Ricky's financial fraud. Everything was ready for their Christmas surprise. Through his partially open door, he heard Dana on the phone, presumably with Ricky. "Everything's arranged," she whispered. "Christmas Eve will be perfect. Melvin won't know what hit him." Melvin smiled coldly at her choice of words. Let them plan their perfect moment. Let them think they held all the cards. The truth would be his Christmas gift to them all. A truth far more devastating than they could imagine. As he encrypted the final documents, Melvin thought about Nathan, about choices and consequences. Biology hadn't been there for 12 years of little league games and science projects. DNA hadn't taught Nathan to ride a bike or helped him overcome his fear of thunderstorms. Love, he had learned, was about choices, and he had made his. Christmas was coming. Dana and Ricky thought they were the architects of destruction, but they had no idea that their perfectly planned revelation would become their own undoing. The truth about Ray Blanchard was just one card in Melvin's hand, a hand he had spent months carefully assembling. Let them have their moment, he thought, listening to Dana laugh softly into her phone. Let them think they've won. The real gift would be watching their house of cards collapse, knowing that Nathan was safely beyond their reach. The endgame was approaching, and Melvin was ready. Not for revenge. Revenge was too simple, too emotional. No, this was about justice, about protecting what mattered most. Christmas would indeed be special this year, just not in the way Dana and Ricky had planned. As December's chills settled over the city, Melvin intensified his time with Nathan. The boy's recent knowledge of his mother's deception weighed heavily on him, visible in the slight slump of his shoulders and the shadows under his eyes. Rather than let Dana and Ricky's machinations poison these precious days, Melvin planned a series of father-son activities that would cement their bond regardless of what Christmas might bring. Their first adventure took them to Mount Baker for a weekend camping trip. As they set up their tent in the crisp mountain air, Melvin watched Nathan methodically securing the guy lines, a skill he'd taught him during their first camping trip 4 years ago. "You remember the knot I showed you?" Melvin asked, testing the tension on one line. "Double figure eight," Nathan replied, demonstrating the technique perfectly. "Because it won't slip in the wind." "That's right. Always secure your foundations first." The deeper meaning wasn't lost on Nathan. He paused, hands still on the rope. "Dad, can we talk about something?" They sat on a fallen log overlooking the valley, the setting sun painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of gold and purple. Nathan pulled his knees to his chest, making himself smaller, a gesture that reminded Melvin of the frightened 6-year-old who'd once crawled into his bed during a thunderstorm. "Mom thinks. She says that after Christmas, everything's going to change." Melvin turned to face his son directly. "What do you think about that?" "I don't want things to change." Nathan's voice cracked slightly. "She keeps talking about how Uncle Ricky will be more involved, how we'll be a real family. But I already have a real family. I have you. Nathan, look at me." Melvin waited until the boy met his eyes. There are two kinds of family in this world. The kind we're born into, and the kind we choose. Sometimes they're the same. Sometimes they're different. But the choices we make, those are what really matter. But what if? Nathan hesitated, tears threatening. What if I'm not who you thought I was? You're my son, Melvin stated firmly. That's not about blood or DNA or anything else. It's about every moment we've shared, every lesson learned, every challenge faced together. Nothing can change that. Not your mother, not Uncle Ricky, not anyone. You promise? I promise. And you know what I always say about promises. They're contracts with our honor. Nathan finished, a small smile breaking through his worry. The following week, they attended Nathan's basketball tournament. The boy had inherited his athletic ability from someone. Another mystery Dana had woven into her web of lies. But his competitive spirit, his strategic thinking on the court, those had been nurtured through countless backyard practice sessions with Melvin. From the bleachers, Melvin watched Nathan execute a perfect pick-and-roll play they'd practiced for hours. Dana sat several rows away, pretending to film the game while actually texting Ricky. Her carefully crafted mask of maternal pride slipped whenever Nathan glanced her way, revealing the calculation beneath. After the game, which Nathan's team won handily, they stopped for ice cream at their favorite shop. While Nathan savored his triple chocolate sundae, Melvin noticed him watching a father and son at another table, the man teaching his boy how to solve a Rubik's Cube. Dad, Nathan's voice was thoughtful. Will you always love me? The question hit Melvin like a physical blow, not for its content but for the fear behind it. He set down his spoon, giving the moment the weight it deserved. Always, he replied, his voice firm with conviction. Family isn't just about blood. It's about choice. And I chose you 12 years ago. Nothing will ever change that. Christmas Eve dawned with a blanket of fresh snow, transforming the neighborhood into a winter wonderland. Dana had spent weeks orchestrating her perfect setting, turning their home into a showcase of holiday perfection. Crystal snowflakes hung from the chandelier, professional garlands wrapped the staircase, and the massive Christmas tree dominated the living room, its white and gold ornaments carefully curated to match her theme. Everything has to be perfect, she instructed the catering staff, her voice sharp with barely contained excitement. This is a very special occasion. Melvin watched from his study as she directed traffic, noting how her hand kept straying to her phone, probably texting updates to Ricky. She'd chosen everyone's outfits, insisted on a professional photographer, even hired a string quartet for ambience. Her attention to detail in planning their family's destruction was almost admirable. The guests began arriving at 6. First came Ken Roberts and Betty Muller, Melvin's parents, who had no idea their Christmas celebration would become a battlefield. Betty immediately gravitated to Nathan, pulling him into a warm embrace while Ken clapped Melvin on the shoulder. Something's different about Dana, Betty murmured to Melvin as they watched his wife direct the catering staff. She seems eager. It's a special night, Melvin replied, his tone neutral. She's been planning it for months. Ricky arrived fashionably late, his entrance carefully timed to coincide with the first round of champagne. His smile dripped with smug satisfaction as he handed Nathan an elaborately wrapped gift. For my favorite nephew, he announced loudly, shooting Melvin a look of barely concealed triumph. Only the best for our boy. Dana fluttered nearby, her designer dress catching the light as she supervised the photographer's angles. Ricky, you shouldn't have. Although Nathan deserves to be spoiled by family, the slip was subtle, but Melvin caught his mother's slight frown. Betty had always been perceptive, her years as a family court judge honing her ability to spot deception. She touched Melvin's arm gently. Is everything all right, son? It will be, he assured her, patting the envelope in his pocket. Just wait for the gift exchange. More relatives arrived, cousins, aunts, uncles, all unwitting audience members for Dana's planned performance. She had positioned everything perfectly. The seating arrangements, the timing of dinner, the moment she would shatter their family's foundations. While Dana basked in her imagined triumph, Melvin quietly placed his envelope on the tree, securing it with a golden ribbon that matched her carefully chosen decorations. The irony of using her own aesthetic choices to deliver her downfall wasn't lost on him. Nathan watched the proceedings with growing anxiety, his young shoulders tense under the weight of secrets. During a quiet moment, he found Melvin in the kitchen. "Dad, I don't feel good about this." "I know, son." Melvin squeezed his shoulder gently. "But sometimes the truth needs to come out. Just remember what I said about choices and promises." The moment Dana had orchestrated for months finally arrived. The family gathered around the tree, champagne glasses in hand, the string quartet providing sophisticated background music. She stood with practiced grace, her expression a masterpiece of false sincerity. "I have an announcement," she began, sharing a knowing look with Ricky. "Actually," Melvin interrupted smoothly, "I have a gift for everyone first." The slight falter in Dana's smile was worth every second of planning. He retrieved the envelope, performing his own choreography with the same precision she'd applied to her decorations. Copies were distributed to Dana, Ricky, and Nathan, each sealed with that matching golden ribbon. "What's this?" Ricky's arrogance slipped slightly as he opened the envelope. Melvin watched their faces as they processed the contents. DNA test results, trust documents securing the house and investments in Nathan's name, evidence of their affair, and the coup de grace, proof of Ray Blanchard's paternity. "Merry Christmas," he said softly, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. "Nathan, the house and your education are secured in a trust. No one can take them from you." Dana's champagne glass slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor she'd had professionally polished for the occasion. The sound matched the breaking of her carefully constructed plans. "Dana, Ricky, you should know that Nathan isn't either of ours biologically. He's Ray Blanchard's son." The room froze. Betty gasped softly, her judicial mind probably already calculating the legal implications. Ken's face darkened with understanding and fury. But it was Nathan's expression, a mix of fear, relief, and desperate hope, that mattered most. "This is ridiculous," Dana sputtered, her mask cracking. "You can't possibly." "The trust is ironclad," Melvin continued calmly. "Everything is in Nathan's name, properly structured and legally binding. There's also a copy of the divorce papers. Don't worry about taking everything. I've already given it all to the person who deserves it." Ricky lunged forward, his face purple with rage. "You had no right." "I had every right." Melvin cut him off coldly. "Brother." The weight of betrayal in that last word stopped Ricky cold. Around them, family members were beginning to understand the scope of what was unfolding, shocked whispers and accusations filling the air. Melvin turned to Nathan, who stood trembling but straight-backed, stronger than any 12-year-old should need to be. He pulled his son into a tight embrace. "I love you, son," he whispered fiercely. "Remember our promise." Then, with the same quiet dignity that had characterized his entire response to their betrayal, Melvin walked out into the snowy night. Behind him, he heard Dana's carefully orchestrated evening dissolving into chaos, her dream of triumph transformed into a nightmare of exposure. 1 year later, the dust had settled into new patterns. Nathan lived in the house with his Aunt Sandy Richard as his guardian, thriving under her care and free from Dana's manipulations. The trust ensured his education and security, while weekly video calls and regular visits kept his bond with Melvin strong. Dana and Ricky's relationship had imploded spectacularly. The truth about Ray Blanchard had shattered their illusions, their arrogance turning to bitter recrimination as their perfect plan crumbled. Last Melvin heard, Dana had moved to another state, her real estate license suspended pending investigation into certain irregular transactions. Melvin had built a new life in Seattle, close enough for frequent visits, but far enough to give Nathan space to heal and grow. Their bond, tested by fire and deception, had emerged stronger, built on a foundation of choice rather than blood. The trust stood as a testament to Melvin's unconditional love, a father's final gift to the son of his heart. But the real victory wasn't in the trust documents or the exposed lies. It was in the quiet moments, helping Nathan with homework over video chat, attending his basketball games, watching him grow into a young man who understood that true family transcends biology. Nathan would later say that Christmas was when he learned the true meaning of fatherhood, not in the DNA results that shattered his world, but in the love of a man who chose to be his father even after learning he wasn't. The trust protected his future, but Melvin's love had saved his present, teaching him that the strongest bonds aren't forged by blood, but by choice. The Christmas tree envelope had delivered justice, but Melvin's true revenge wasn't in exposing their betrayal. It was in rising above it, choosing love over bitterness, and protecting the one innocent person in the whole tragic story. In the end, he had given Nathan the greatest gift possible, the knowledge that he was wanted, chosen, and loved, not out of obligation or biology, but because of who he was. Epilogue. 10 years later. The autumn breeze rustled through the maple trees lining Brighton Prep's campus as 22-year-old Nathan Britton adjusted his graduation cap. A decade had passed since that fateful Christmas Eve, and life had taken unexpected turns for everyone involved. Nathan stood as valedictorian of Brighton Prep's medical school, his academic achievements a testament to both his dedication and the trust that had secured his future. Beside him, Melvin beamed with pride, his hair now touched with distinguished gray at the temples. Though they lived in different cities, their bond had only strengthened over the years. "I never doubted you'd make it," Melvin said, straightening Nathan's tie, a gesture that had become their tradition since Nathan's high school graduation. "Couldn't have done it without you, Dad." Nathan's voice carried the same warmth it had when he was 12, though deeper now. "Remember when you helped me with my first biology assignment? Who knew it would lead to medical school?" The years had been kind to Melvin. After relocating to Seattle, he had transformed TechGuard Solutions into a cybersecurity empire, specializing in protecting medical institutions, inspired by Nathan's career choice. He had remarried 5 years ago to Claire Bennett, a pediatric surgeon who shared his values about chosen family. Their blended household included her daughter Emma, now 13, who adored her stepbrother Nathan. The same couldn't be said for Dana Hansen. The implosion of her carefully orchestrated plans had triggered a spectacular downfall. The investigation into her fraudulent real estate dealings, triggered by evidence Melvin had quietly provided to authorities, had resulted in a suspended license and hefty fines. Her attempt to contest the trust had backfired spectacularly when Ollie Hartman presented evidence of her broader financial misconduct. "Did you hear about Mom?" Nathan asked as they walked across campus. "She tried reaching out again last month. Through her new lawyer? Instagram. Actually, she's selling wellness products now. One of those multi-level marketing schemes." Nathan's tone carried neither bitterness nor pity, just factual observation. "She's living in Arizona with husband number 4. Still claims she did everything for my own good." Dana's post-divorce life had become a cautionary tale in their social circle. After her real estate career imploded, she had cycled through 3 marriages, each shorter than the last. Her attempts to rebuild her reputation in various cities had consistently crumbled when her past caught up with her. The truth about Ray Blanchard had become public knowledge, destroying her carefully crafted image of victimhood. Ricky Francis had fared even worse. The SEC investigation into his business dealings, prompted by irregularities discovered during the divorce proceedings, had uncovered a web of fraud extending far beyond his affair with Dana. His girlfriend, Jessica Chin, had turned state's evidence, revealing how he had used their relationship to hide assets and launder money. Uncle Ricky sent a card, Nathan mentioned, his tone sardonic, from federal prison. Still has 2 years left on his sentence. Melvin nodded, unsurprised. "And he's still claiming that he had no idea about Ray Blanchard?" "Yeah. Though he did finally admit the whole devoted uncle act was just to spite you." Guess prison gives people time to reflect. The investigation had revealed the full extent of Ricky's vindictiveness. His interest in Nathan had never been paternal. It was purely about hurting his more successful brother. The discovery that he wasn't Nathan's father had shattered his ego more than losing his freedom. Aunt Sandy Richard, who had stepped up as Nathan's guardian after that Christmas, now ran a successful youth counseling center. Her experience helping Nathan navigate the aftermath of family deception had inspired her to assist other children dealing with parental betrayal. She had become a frequent speaker at family therapy conferences, sharing their story as an example of how love and honesty could overcome betrayal. "Grandma Betty's in the audience," Nathan said, spotting the former judge in the graduation crowd. She's still angry at Mom, you know? Says Dana's actions cheapened everything she fought for in family court. Betty Muller had retired from the bench but remained active in family law reform, using Dana and Ricky's case as an example of why trust law needed strengthening. She and Ken had become vocal advocates for children's rights in custody cases, their personal experience lending weight to their arguments. The graduation ceremony itself was a testament to how life had evolved. In the audience sat Claire and Emma, along with Aunt Sandy and the grandparents. Ollie Hartman attended with his wife, their friendship with Melvin having deepened into true family bonds. Even Ignacio Russell, the PI whose investigation had uncovered the truth, had become a regular at family gatherings. After the ceremony, as they gathered for photos, Nathan pulled Melvin aside. You know what I realized today? That Christmas wasn't just about exposing their lies. It was about teaching me what real love looks like. How so? Mom and Uncle Ricky thought love was about possession, having control, keeping secrets, but you showed me it's about choices. Choosing to love, to protect, to be honest, even when it hurts. The wisdom in Nathan's words reflected the man he'd become, compassionate yet clear-eyed, shaped by adversity but not hardened by it. His choice to pursue medicine, specializing in genetic counseling, was partly influenced by his own story. He wanted to help other families navigate the complex intersection of biology and belonging. Their extended family had gathered at Melvin and Claire's Seattle home that evening, celebrating not just Nathan's graduation but the journey that had brought them here. The house rang with laughter, conversations, and the kind of genuine warmth that Dana's perfectly orchestrated Christmas Eve had tried but failed to fake. In the kitchen, Claire organized the catering with the easy efficiency of someone used to managing operating rooms, while Emma proudly showed Nathan her science project, carrying on the tradition of siblings helping siblings. Aunt Sandy discussed her latest counseling techniques with Betty, while Ken and Ollie debated recent changes in family law. Watching them, Melvin reflected on how tragedy had ultimately strengthened their true family bonds while exposing the false ones. Dana and Ricky's betrayal had intended to destroy, but instead had cleared the way for something more authentic to grow. Nathan's phone buzzed, another message from Dana, this one claiming she'd found herself through essential oils and wanted to make amends. He showed it to Melvin with a slight smile before deleting it unread. Some people never learn, do they? Nathan observed. They learn the wrong lessons, Melvin corrected. They think love is about what you can take. They never understand it's about what you choose to give. The evening wound down with toasts and stories, each person there representing a choice to create family through love rather than obligation. Claire's daughter Emma had started calling Nathan Big Brother without any prompting, their relationship as real as any biological bond. As guests departed, Nathan lingered in his old room, now converted to a study but still holding photos from his childhood, camping trips, basketball games, science fairs. Every image captured moments of choice, of love freely given and returned. 10 years, Nathan mused, looking at a photo from that last Christmas Eve. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if they'd succeeded with their plan. They never could have, Melvin replied confidently. Their plan was built on lies. Truth doesn't always win quickly, but it wins eventually. The proof was in the lives they'd built. While Dana drifted between failed marriages and pyramid schemes, while Ricky counted days in federal prison, their chosen family had flourished. Nathan's medical career, Claire and Emma's addition to their lives, Aunt Sandy's counseling work, the strengthened bonds with grandparents and friends, all testified to the power of choosing love over deception. The scandal had faded from society gossip, but its lessons remained. In legal circles, the Britton case was cited in trust law reforms. In family therapy, their story helped other families understand that biology was just one way to create kinship. And in their own lives, it stood as a reminder that the strongest bonds aren't inherited but chosen. As the Seattle skyline twinkled beyond the window, father and son stood together, their relationship a living rebuke to those who thought family could be reduced to DNA or divorce settlements. The trust had secured Nathan's education, but Melvin's love had secured his future in ways no legal document could measure. The Christmas tree envelope had delivered justice a decade ago, but the real gift had been the truth it revealed. That love, when chosen freely and given honestly, could survive any betrayal and build something stronger from the ashes of deception. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
A few weeks back, I saw someone come into my house on the new doorbell camera, but I never saw them leave. The next day, the footage disappeared. So, playing detective and starting to investigate, my soon-to-be ex-wife, STBXW, realized I was onto her. She thought I had found evidence, probably from the recently installed doorbell camera she deleted. I was setting up in-home cameras and VRs at the time. However, she ended up confessing to an ongoing affair lasting about a year, during most of the time I spent helping my elderly parent. She admitted I deserved better and suggested a fair divorce, selling the house and splitting the proceeds. She might even pay alimony for a while. We'll share most of the debt, and the house sale should cover it, leaving a bit to start over. It's disheartening and unfair. I admit I felt anger and wanted revenge, but there aren't many people to expose her to who would care. No one on the other person's side to expose to. He's single, divorced, and surprisingly more informed about my marriage than I was. Their relationship isn't close, and it's likely not her first time. Despite the urge for revenge, I let it go without seeking more pain. This situation comes at a crucial time as I deal with elder care issues, and I don't have the energy or desire to fight for anything. She offered to fix things, but we both know there's too much pain and wrong between us, and I'm still broken from being cheated on over 25 years ago. Some scars never heal. I've recently questioned if my entire relationship was a rebound, but I'm a committed person, and once I commit, I'm all in. Maybe I did it too soon. Now I can't see trusting anyone again. So there's no confrontation, revenge, or exposure, just two lives torn apart. Now I have to rebuild myself without my pride and ego. It's another failure in a long list of them. Life as I knew it is over, and I'm just going through the motions to handle things. I don't want to go home, but I have to pack and prepare the house for sale. Then I need to find an apartment, and I don't even know where I want to live. It's all just lousy. I wasted more than half my life on someone. The only blessing is not having kids since, once the divorce is final, I won't have to be in contact with her, though that will take time. Every time I hear her voice, the pain resurfaces. My version of pain shopping is looking back at our pictures and the otherwise good times we had. I can't figure out why I'm so stuck in the past, mourning something I thought I was ready to move on from. I lie awake, thinking about everything I did wrong, believing I was never good enough for anyone, and wondering why I deserve to be treated poorly. I reflect on how crappy my life is and why I always seem to end up on the losing side. Now, I'm old, broken, and feel like I don't deserve this crappy life. No hopes, no dreams, just alone in my thoughts. More thoughts from later last night. She hasn't even called or texted me since I left. I did tell her not to, and I meant it. She probably knew I did. But not a single, sorry, not a, are you okay? Is she just sitting at home watching a show like it's any other Tuesday? Or maybe not. During the Christmas before last, we discussed how we ended up in a dead bedroom. I mentioned that about 15 years ago, we went through many premature births from IVF, and the experience scared me away from closeness for a long time. I was terrified of accidentally getting her pregnant and losing the baby. It led both of us to seek mental health help, and we barely pulled out of deep depressions with help and luck. Now things have worsened after her confession of a year-long affair. I said something very hurtful about her deserving to lose our kids. I might send her an apology text for that statement. Could saying my fears from over a year ago have triggered her to cheat on me? I only shared that with my therapist at the time, and we decided it wasn't the right time to discuss it with her. Maybe she blames me for our years of a dead bedroom. Maybe it's all my fault. Oh God, what have I done? After thinking it over, against my better judgment, I called. I knew she probably wouldn't pick up, so I left a voicemail apologizing for what I said. I admitted it was hurtful and not true. I acknowledged that it's over and suggested we handle it like adults in our 50s, not like the 20-somethings we were when we met. I expressed hope that she finds what she needs and left it at that. My wife called me last night. She appreciated my apology and knew the things I had said were to try to hurt her. We didn't discuss much, except for her apologizing again and blah blah blah. I did tell her I would be coming home this weekend and that I needed her not to be there. It was mostly civil, but I made it clear that I don't care where she goes. I suggested she stay with her boyfriend, since that's who she wanted anyway. She denied it, insisting she wants me back and that we can work it out. She asked for one chance, promising to do anything to make it up. I'll admit I wanted nothing more than to go back in time to any time other than the last year, that I would even go to the worst times in our lives instead of now. But I stood firm this time and told her I don't see any way we can be together now. It's been a year, and I can't imagine feeling the same for her. I only asked one question: how many times? She stayed quiet for a long time, but I refused to say anything. She asked if I really wanted to know, not wanting to hurt me more. I said I need to know. That's when she hurt me even more, revealing it was only a few times in the beginning. After about a month, it was almost every day when I was away, and some weekends when she claimed to be at the gym for about 6 months. In the last few months, it was about once or twice a week while I was away. It made me sick. I muted the call to let out some of that pain. So she was close to him more times in a year than we have been in the past 10, 15 years, hundreds of times, maybe even more than the beginning of our relationship. I wanted to ask more questions, but I was too hurt and ashamed. I wanted to know if he was better, bigger, and what they did, but I couldn't take any more. I just said she should go to him this weekend so I can be alone at home and gather more of my important things. I don't even have a permanent place to take them. I've been awake, got a bottle of good scotch, and now I have to work and take care of my parent while hungover. As I thought we had agreed, I'm back at the house to gather some things. Thank goodness she's nowhere in sight. I'm gathering some documents I forgot when I left last weekend, packing clothes and other things. It's going faster than I thought. I'm determined to keep moving before I get too down. In the basement, packing up a few things is tough, but I want to keep moving. Faintly over the tunes, I hear water running in the pipes. It goes on for a while before I notice. I walk upstairs and hear the shower going. I'm stunned. I make coffee and decide it's better to go out to my car. I sit in the driveway, considering driving away, but I just sit there stunned. I start writing a nasty text but decide against it, opting to wait for her to leave again. My new neighbor introduces himself as I stand outside having a smoke. I don't tell him anything but try to be cordial. As we part ways, the garage door opens, and she's behind her car, asking to speak to me. I stand through introductions from the neighbor and my wife. We go inside, and I'm still dumbstruck. I ask why she's here. She explains she can't check into the place she's staying until later today and was at the gym. She thought I wouldn't mind showering and grabbing more things. She assumed she could come and go without a problem since she didn't see me around initially. I stand there, wondering who this person in front of me is. Luckily, after a brief and awkward apology on her part and a suggestion for more counseling, I look her in the eye and say no. I tell her to leave. I have things to do, and she agreed to stay away. I say this is what she caused and go back to the basement. I sit here typing this, trying to control myself and my blood pressure. I just heard the garage door open and close, so thankfully she's gone. Now I'm a bit of a mess, wanting to get back to packing, but my bourbon collection is staring me in the face. I already had one good belt earlier. I know if I have another this early, today will be even more of a bust. So, here it goes. Sunday comes after another night without sleep, filled with packing and a lot of anguish. Everything was tough, the memories, pictures, and items we had chosen together. Our wedding album and other things just stirred up more emotions I tried to control. Despite the difficulty, I persevered and focused on the things that mattered most to me. Unfortunately, one item brought me the most pain, the sealed urn containing our children's ashes. We had planned to combine our ashes and have a relative scatter them in the ocean near our favorite beach when one or both of us passed. Well, that plan is off now, but here's the thing. I don't know if it's wrong that I want to keep it with me. I know I have to discuss this with her eventually, but I'm unsure how that conversation will go. I don't know if we can have it opened and split the remains. It feels wrong, like neither of us is getting them. I'll ask my attorney about it when I retain one, I guess. I didn't mention it to her since my confidence in her was below zero at that point. Sunday evening, I'm nearly packed with things I'm taking with me for now. I wanted to have enough so that if I couldn't tolerate coming back for a few weeks at least. along with a few more important keepsakes, documents, etc. I knew she was supposed to return after 9, as we discussed, and I didn't really want to be there. I resisted the urge to dismantle all the electronics, reset the router, etc., out of spite. So I felt like the bigger person for once, with the help of some supportive calls from a friend and some DMs. Anyway, it's about 7, and I'm loading the last bits into my car. Well, no shocker here, but yep, she shows up. She comes in looking a bit shaken, but not nearly as bad as I felt. She starts off saying it looked like I was ready to leave again. If I really had to go so early, could I at least talk to her? I was already frustrated that she was even there and wanted to be stronger than I knew I was. I said I didn't want to be too late, and I had to get back in time for the weekend help with my parent to be relieved. That I only had a few minutes, but if there is something important, she can tell me, and if needed, I could call her while driving. She then says she understood, but that she really needed me to know what was going on with her this weekend, and she wished we could talk without me being angry. She said she spent the weekend alone. Not sure I believe this, but considering all that had happened and what she's done to us, that she knew I couldn't forgive what she's done, but that she does and will always love me and be in love with me forever. That she knows I don't believe this now, but that she was so angry with herself for hurting me so bad and destroying the only man who ever loved her unconditionally and was always there for her. I was doing my best to just not shout, sob, hug her, or anything and just give her the stoic look of indifference. I'll admit I failed. My eyes watered up, but I struggled to not let the tears fall. Yeah, I failed at that too, but didn't really speak. I figured I'd just listen and hope to still just leave after she said what she had to. I listened to her say many things and justifications, reasons why she thought she did this for so long, why she didn't stop herself, why even when she thought I knew, she thought I just didn't or wouldn't care, how she had thought I must have been cheating for so many years, how I never seemed to want her, how we had been just roommates, how she still knew I was the only man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with, how she wanted to come to me so many times and confess, but that she knew I would never be able to accept it and her back if she told me what she did. At every turn, she repeatedly admitted it was entirely her fault and not mine. She mentioned her intention to seek counseling to understand why she engaged in such behavior for an extended period. She claimed our life together had crumbled because, despite having everything she desired, she thought she could live the rest of our lives without closeness, a decision she said she had come to terms with. She even stated that I could be with other people if I desired, and it all seemed like typical behavior of someone who cheated. As I suspected, she eventually shared that during our conversation 2 Christmases ago, she became really upset when she learned I was afraid of closeness with her due to the fear of getting her pregnant again. She argued that my concerns about pregnancy were merely excuses, suggesting that I never truly wanted her or a family, especially when I resisted adopting. She admitted to growing upset every day, feeling that the only thing missing in our lives was closeness and family, which she believed I had kept from her. She expressed anger, believing that I had always blamed her for our child losses and lied every time I claimed otherwise. She felt I had been disgusted by her for losing our children, and that resentment lingered. Despite all those years, she claimed to have loved me enough for both of us. When my parents' health worsened, she thought I was just using it as an excuse to be away from her. Suddenly, everything clicked in her head, and she believed all her fears were true. She just wanted to be loved, and she felt I hadn't been truthful about my feelings all along. The person she referred to as the gym guy wasn't even a possibility until all these realizations hit her. She insisted she had never thought of being unfaithful and initially did it out of spite. Afterward, she realized how much she missed closeness, although she kept telling him it was only about closeness. She claimed she had no intention of leaving me and didn't discuss me with him, though that seems doubtful now. Eventually, she admitted to growing a connection with him, telling him she hadn't felt like this in years, but it was nothing like what we shared. She reached the point where she insisted it was over and hoped I could forgive her. She wanted us to talk again to find a way forward, even if we decided to split, asking for time before considering divorce. She argued that I had been dishonest for many years and should give her the chance she believed she deserved. At this point, I'll confess I couldn't handle it anymore and exclaimed, "You deserve a chance after a year of cheating?" I reminded her that when I shared my past fears, I had worked through them in therapy and had never mentioned them again to avoid this exact situation. I explained that despite my efforts in recent years to reach out, be more engaged, romantic, and connected, she responded minimally. I revealed that opening up my deepest secret with her was intended to bring us closer, but instead, she used it against me to cheat and devastate my life. I admitted I felt so shattered that I considered ending things almost daily. While she admitted having similar thoughts, she claimed she couldn't do that to me. In frustration, I screamed at her, "But you can do this to me? For a year?" After calming down, I asserted that I could never be open and vulnerable to her or anyone else again. Knowing how she weaponized my fears, weaknesses, and honesty against me had forever changed me. Although I had feared this was the catalyst after reflecting on everything last week, about how and when it happened, according to her, I still wasn't sure I believed her claim that she hadn't done this before. I was already running about 45 minutes late from my planned departure time. I knew I had to speed up on the highway, and my mind wasn't in the right place. After leaving, I mentioned that I would ponder what she said, and if I had more to discuss, I'd call her while on the road. However, during the drive, all I could do was blast loud music and cry in intense pain, realizing my thoughts about causing this were confirmed. It was an even more agonizing ride than the first one after D-Day. In the end, I didn't call her. Now, in the sobering light of day, I question not only how I caused this, but also if there's even a slight chance she's seen my posts and is using them against me. To be honest, she isn't active on social media, and I doubt she uses Reddit at all. It was never on her phone, tablet, or in her App Store download history. I also reflect on how foolish I was to let my guard down with anyone, thinking there are things you should never share. If I had kept everything closed up, I wouldn't be in this situation. I consider this karma since I was on the verge of leaving last fall anyway. I feel like I'm just moving on autopilot, and this incident proves I should maintain the facade of being a happy guy and never let my guard down again. It feels like I ruined everything I had. I'm still consulting with my attorney and trying to stay on the path, as I don't know how I can come back to her after this. The truth is, she has reopened the wounds in my heart and torn away everything I was holding on to keep going. Sent via her work email. Me informed X that I had hired someone to represent me in legal matters and requested information on who to connect them with. I advised X to seek counsel for the consequences of their actions. X expressed a desire to discuss the situation further and apologized, acknowledging that they couldn't imagine how I must feel. X recognized that they didn't deserve a chance for a conversation before any decisions were made, but suggested that time might help things calm down. X expressed understanding that my opinion of them was likely better than they deserved and proposed discussing counseling and personal matters through text or a call outside of work email. I responded, letting X know that I would be occupied with work and P's move, but would use their personal email for further communication on this matter. X thanked me and asked me to consider their words. They expressed concern for my well-being, acknowledging the loneliness I might be experiencing, and inquired about P's well-being during the move. X sent their love to P and apologized once again, urging me to call soon. I just realized that P, my parent, is losing everything they own, their home of 50-plus years and memories since they're moving into a facility. How does a person with dementia feel being moved? How do they feel having to be reminded nearly every day because they forgot? Then going through the emotions of it all over again. I've been trying to be as gentle as possible, but we're sorting through things to see what they really want. After contemplating the exchange more, the mention of not sending Ish to work stuck with me. Initially, I thought it made sense. Personal matters shouldn't mix with work email, but I'm pretty sure she must have been using her work phone for this. Her personal one is always clean, and I updated it for her new watch last Christmas. I guess I could have still missed it, though. Off we go. Update. I found a better place to stay temporarily, with a friend who lives close to work, and I've moved in for the time being. While I thought about renting an apartment right away, this arrangement works well for the short term. Now, on to the remaining events. I served her with divorce papers, but she responded contentiously through her attorney. Recently, I had to deal with a maintenance issue at my old home. Thankfully, it wasn't too damaging, but significant enough to require quick handling. When I arrived to deal with it, fortunately, I thought, she wasn't around. I met with the contractor, handled the issue, and aimed to be out before she returned. It took several hours, but I managed to move things around and fix the problem. Of course, my luck couldn't be that good. Later that day, I received a call from a doctor saying she had been admitted to the hospital. I'm still her emergency contact and husband, so it wasn't a real surprise. Before I arrived, she had called an ambulance thinking she was having a heart attack. It turned out to be a panic attack, but she told them she had constant self-breaking thoughts and was admitted for observation. She's been in there since, so I had to inform her boss about her medical leave. After talking to the doctor, I decided to go and see her. Her doctor said I could visit, but I needed to be non-confrontational since she was in a delicate state. I was conflicted about it, thinking it might be standard cheater script BS. Despite my feelings, I still care for her and don't want her to damage herself or struggle in the future. In the past, she has been in care for mental health due to unrelated issues, along with another chronic health problem throughout her life. During that time, I was fully present, doing everything I could to help her. Also, selfishly, I don't want this situation to impact her ability to handle our joint affairs. I discussed it with my friend, who said it's up to me what to do about visiting her. I also spoke with my attorney after the initial visits. They advised me to be cautious, not make promises, or say anything that could be used against me, etc. I knew before visiting that cheaters often use the threat of self-damage as a manipulation tactic. However, given her history, I'm also aware that this might genuinely be a true and serious situation for her. I get it. I shouldn't let anything tied to her actions hinder my progress in moving forward with my life. But there's a part of me that feels the need to be there for her. It's frustrating to have these feelings while still wishing none of this had happened, but it did. I feel like I've been firm with her, but seeing her in such a state might set me back. Before you criticize me, I can't just abandon her. It's not in my nature. She really has no one else. Her only real friend lives far away and is dealing with her own serious medical condition. So, I informed her doctor that I would visit her in the hospital and did so the following day. When I got there, she was a mess. I brought some things she might need, thinking she would likely be there for at least a few days. She was still sleeping when I arrived, hooked up to an IV and various monitors. None of them seemed related to mental health, but I figured maybe dehydration or something. But all I could think about was how I had seen her sleep so many times, looking beautiful and peaceful, the person I wanted. As I sat there watching her, she started to wake up, and all the feelings of anger and betrayal started to come back. But I held it together. When she finally woke up, surprised to see me, she begged me for a hug and forgiveness. I said I was there to make sure she was okay, expressing my worry. I made it clear that I wasn't there to talk about us. We were civil, but there were lots of tears on her side. We talked for a long time. Then she hit me with another bombshell. During her visit to the gynecologist for STD tests and a checkup, they found something still being assessed. Oh boy, I thought, here we go. This crazy situation where she caught an STD and I was going to hear about it. Or maybe, fortunately, not the case. She was found to have fairly aggressive ovarian cancer. Now, I'm no expert, but I know that usually that type of cancer is like a last sentence. I had to step out of the room to gather myself for a minute. I had all these emotions going through me and didn't want her to see them. I composed myself and went back in, and we talked for a long time. In our talk, I eventually agreed to help her however I can. Though part of me wanted to tell her to rely on her boyfriend now, I made it clear that it had nothing to do with us being together. I believed she would do the same for me if the situation were reversed. But who knows? Her panic attack, it turns out, was the result of getting this news and her birthday, which I totally ignored, and getting served in the same week. So it's like the perfect storm hitting her life, maybe too much karma. She was just feeling like ending her life would be easier than fighting me, this disease alone, etc., losing everything and now losing her life on top of it. She also didn't want me to somehow end up bankrupt from her likely medical debt. Her life insurance and giving me the house totally free now would make for a nest egg I could totally start over with. But ultimately, I convinced her that her being around and fighting this with everything possible is the only thing I want for and from her. I made it clear that I am not a reason for her to end herself, etc. So, this is what I've been up to lately. Crisscrossing highways for work, visiting my parent, the hospital, my friend's place, and now back to my old home for more of her belongings. She's been moved to a regular room since her doctors believe she's no longer a danger to herself. More tests have been conducted, and today we're expecting precise results on the stage of her condition. Preliminary exams suggest at least stage 2B or higher. If there's a chance it's not stage 4, we might manage, but if it is, we're looking at a shortened but tough outcome. I'm writing this in the hospital cafeteria, waiting for the oncology department to provide more results and details. I'm the type to do anything for anyone. If her actions hadn't pushed me away, I'd be a wreck. Not that I haven't been in private. Once again, I'm being the strong one for both of us, attempting to stay optimistic, which goes against my natural pessimism. The most significant development, if there's hope, involves major emergency surgery and chemo, followed by a period of care. I've committed to being there for her through surgery, chemo, and recovery in the best-case scenario. I haven't explicitly said I'd move in and stay with her, though that might be necessary. My stance on divorce hasn't changed. I've consulted my lawyer about the legal implications and whether we can still be considered separated. They say we can consider this an in-house separation, given certain conditions. My other concern is avoiding part of her medical debt, likely to delay our proceedings. They mentioned amending our settlement agreement, but she would need to agree that none of this is my liability. So, is there a chance I can care for her through this, avoid emotional reconnection, and still move on with my life, regardless of how this unfolds? Update. For those still interested, I finally met with the doctors. It's stage 2B, and it has spread, but the tumors are still small and haven't reached the bladder or other distant organs like the liver, which, from my understanding, is nearly impossible to cure. She'll undergo serious surgeries and chemo. I had already made up my mind to support her in her battle, regardless of her actions. I won't leave her to face this alone. Some might say it's not my responsibility anymore, but I can't be that tough person I thought I could initially, or what some folks here suggest. Well, I'm too old to care what people think. I'm doing it for myself. I'll continue with the separation and divorce. Unfortunately, I'll probably move back in for in-house separation to assist her for a while. I've discussed the plan with my attorney. They understand my position and say we can still consider any time I'm there as separated, as long as we don't share a bed, which isn't a problem for various reasons. We also need an agreement that she won't make the process more difficult, as it seemed to be her original plan. I'll ensure she understands that a condition of my support is that she doesn't contest and drag out the process. However, I'll agree to give her time to get better situated. I confess I'll feel guilty, as if I'm bargaining with her life, but I guess we all have our limits. She'll undergo surgery in the next few days for additional biopsies and a major operation. The treatment plan is aggressive, but it's better to stop the spread now. I guess I don't need more details than that. In all likelihood, as my post title states, her cheating may have saved her life, as she would likely have discovered this too late otherwise. So, I suppose someone in this situation gets a win. Update. I've been in the hospital with my wife since yesterday morning, and it's been just as awful as everything else that's been happening. Firstly, she's in critical condition. During surgery, they had to stop due to uncontrollable blood pressure. The surgeon removed a significant amount of cancer, but not all of it. Further surgery is too risky at this point. Last night, she had a seizure, causing additional damage and bleeding, leading to another surgery, despite it not being advised earlier, to stop internal bleeding. She got out of that surgery earlier this morning, but has been in and out of consciousness. They're doing everything possible to prevent her from having a stroke. I'm not sure if she'll make it, but I've been without sleep for 2 days, imagining the worst. She's a bit more stable, but it's still a delicate situation. Additionally, while waiting for her initial surgery, I used her work phone and saw a message from her affair partner a few weeks ago from an unrecognized number. Although she had his other number blocked, she kept their conversation. He was apologizing for how he treated her the last time they met. There's a whole story there that I won't go into, but it happened because I tracked him down, almost doing something foolish and dangerous. He reached out to her, and she bargained to meet with him to avoid legal trouble. This was almost a month ago. Anyway, I saw her response that he was the biggest mistake of her life. She hated herself for meeting him, and she would never be in touch or see him again. For everyone's safety, she asked him not to contact her again. I don't take this as anything, as I found it, not something she admitted to me, so I guess she still has her secrets. Although I went through everything, including her work emails and personal accounts, and looked back before last year, I found nothing suspicious before then. Again, it doesn't change my mind about divorce or helping her. I guess I'm just ranting since everything is messed up right now. Whether she lives or dies, she may never know that I know this, and it only proves to me that she's still capable of lying to me. I don't even know if we'll ever have the chance to talk about it. At this point, it doesn't really matter. So either way, I may be done with my posts since nothing else matters if she's not alive, has some brain damage, or is in a worse state than expected. I'll still do what I can for her and hope for the best, but naturally, I expect the worst. The best I can hope for is to get some actual sleep before the week ends. Update. Here's the latest update on my challenging situation. My wife's condition has been fluctuating, mostly for the worse. The medical team suspects she had a small stroke, but she's holding on and showing slight improvement over the weekend. While she's not out of the woods, doctors are a bit more hopeful. She's been conscious more, experiencing a lot of pain and on strong medications. They moved her from intensive care, and she'll likely go into rehab before returning home. On Thursday, my wife's best friend, M, reached out to me. We hadn't spoken since this ordeal began, and I assumed she knew and was supporting my wife. I left her a voicemail the night after my wife's first surgery, just in case they hadn't talked, informing her about the critical situation. I suggested that if she wanted to see my wife, she should do so soon, in case the worst happened. Although M and I weren't very close, she and my wife had been friends since their teens, and they went to college together. We spent time together on holidays and a couple of vacations. M called on Thursday, expressing sympathy for what we were going through and asking to visit my wife. She also inquired if she could stay at the house, possibly thinking I still lived there. I agreed, even though staying in my own house part-time still causes me pain. M is a genuinely good person, and I knew losing her friend was weighing on her. I picked her up from the airport Thursday evening, and we went straight to the hospital. During the drive, we discussed my wife's condition and everything that happened since the surgery. M finally revealed that she knew about our situation. She mentioned that my wife had only told her everything a few days before being initially hospitalized when she received the news about cancer and being served. They hadn't talked much last year, not like before, and M thought it was because my wife struggled with the news about M's own medical struggles and was not good at potentially losing her best friend. The kicker was that M had shared her suspicions about her husband cheating with my wife. They were working through it, but M believed it was just emotional, thinking he had a crush on someone at work, but didn't pursue it. She advised my wife on how to handle the situation, marriage counseling, set boundaries, and demand the respect she deserved. M shared how they had argued a lot when she told my wife. She wasn't sure they could still be friends after knowing how deceitful my wife was to both her and me. M even cursed my wife out, saying she deserved the consequences in the divorce. This was surprising because M is not someone who usually curses. She's pretty religious and straight-laced. M mentioned that my wife had called her a few times after, but she had ignored the calls, thinking I was trying to involve her more. When she heard my message, she knew she couldn't go without seeing my wife again if the worst happened, and didn't want it to be their last words. So she called me to come visit. We spent a lot of time together this weekend, not in any inappropriate way, but she shared more insights after visiting WW. We talked almost every night until very late, and it was nice because she never pressured me to stay together. After each visit, she seemed more lenient on her. Last night, she surprised me by revealing that WW had asked her to discuss DNR, do not resuscitate, and other end-of-life matters with me. DW wasn't sure if, in the worst-case scenario, I could take her off life support. If her condition worsened, she expressed a desire to end her life to avoid more suffering or living with severe disabilities. DW asked M to convince me to let her go if the time came, and I reached out or couldn't cope with the outcome. I'm unsure about the legal circumstances other than being brain dead here. I plan to talk to her about this tonight, but I'm uncertain about what to say. Personally, I don't believe in keeping people alive if they are suffering, and I might do the right thing in the appropriate circumstance. However, I can't commit to anything beyond that, and I worry I might be influenced by my own desire to be done with this. Even in the right medical scenario, I think I would carry a lot of guilt forever. I'll also discuss this with my therapist, though my appointment isn't until later in the week. I asked her friend M if she would consider assuming medical power of attorney, POA, over my wife before she left, and she is thinking about it. I will also approach one of my close relatives, though they live far away, and I can't guarantee their involvement. I'm adamant about making only legal decisions. I briefly talked to my lawyer, and we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow. However, tonight, I will tell WW that I understand her wishes, but I can't agree to them at this time.